Okay. The next person on the list is Ed Williams. Ed Williams.
Listen.
Final call, Ed Williams. All right. The last person on the list is Liz Ogilvy.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak out. I wanted to speak to the diversity issue, which is the last on the agenda, and I have a very early morning, so I just can't hang that late. I appreciate the council calling this question. As somebody who talks about race all the time, because I work in food, and you can't talk about food and land without talking about race, I want to encourage the council to consider a slightly different approach. This is not a conversation about diversity. This is a conversation about a system that's been in place for a really long time and was broken before the current mayor we have. And this council itself can remember how long it took to get ward-based elections, and that was really a conversation about race. And so what we really need to do is begin to think about how we talk about race with each other. It was really disheartening to hear the mayor make the comment that he did. I think his intent was good. Perhaps he meant to say, I don't see race, but that's a problem. Because the goal for people of color is not color blindness, because that is completely unrealistic. It's something some liberal came up with to make us all feel better. The goal is to consider what we see when we see people of color, or what we see when we see white people. And in our city, people still like to think of itself as a white city, with white being the norm. And that's why it's comfortable for white people to consistently be appointed to positions of leadership. Until we can really talk about ourselves as a city that's a majority city of people of color, and have really honest and frank conversations around what that has meant historically and what it means today, sort of charging off and saying, hire more people of color is not really the way to go. We need to take a couple of steps back and think about how even this council relates to each other, and begin to do real strong groundwork on dismantling our personal biases and the systems that keep these repeated hires in place. And that's what I want to, as a resident of the city, as somebody whose family's been here for 90 years, and loves the city, loves the effort that the council is putting forth. We need to clean each of the houses we live in before we can point fingers at someone else's house. I appreciate that the chief of staff is African American. We know the mayor would suffer a great deficit without her, but she does not hire significant numbers of people. She doesn't establish policy. So I appreciate the efforts of the council president and the council, but it's a deeper conversation than just hiring people of color. It's acknowledging that color blindness is not real. It's acknowledging that when we see white, we see right. Whether it's our intent or not, it's how we're socialized. I'm 55 years old. We've been raised in an environment where we are conditioned to think certain things about each other. And if we don't name that and become intentional about undoing it, we will not move this conversation forward. So I appreciate your having it, but I want to encourage you to think about having it in a different way, because public calling out of a white person around racism and the person who leads our city around something that is systemic is probably not going to get us where we need to go.
Thank you. We will now begin our regular meeting. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Present Council Shea.
Present.
Present Council Gomez.
Present.
Present Council Walsh. Here Council Fenton. Present Council Letterman. Present Councilor Edwards. Present Councilor Ash. Here Council Hurst. Present Councilor Ryan. Here Councilor Allen. Present Councilor Ramos.
Present. If everyone could please rise and join me in a moment of silence. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Councilor Williams has informed me that he is feeling under the weather and will not be able to join us tonight. Before we get to the first item, are there any reports of committee? Councilor Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. President. On last Wednesday, we had an economic development meeting on marijuana moratorium. which was sent to a committee by my subcommittee member, Councilor Jesse Letterman. Present was Marcus Williams, Jesse Letterman, President Orlando Ramos, Councilors Kateri Walsh, Tim Allen, Tim Ryan, and Michael Fenton. We were also joined by Phil Dromney, Ed Pakula, and lawyer Tashina Davis. We all had a very, I believe, a great conversation on exactly what we needed to know on, what were the ordinances and what was the time frame that we needed to actually put some of these things in order. And we have decided unanimously to amend not the year moratorium, but September 30th. And Phil Dromney and our city solicitor, Ed Pakula, thought that was a good time frame for us to get all our stuff and our business in order. For the most part, we believe that by September 30th, once we're out of summer sessions and the planning department can convene, we can get down to really putting the people first and the vote first, and coming down to a solution and making sure that this type of economic development is ready for our city to move forward. Thank you.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other reports of committee? Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. I attended the Capital Planning Committee meeting. This is a meeting that only takes place annually, and it was last week. It was hard for me to make the original time of the meeting, and since I'm the only council rep to the committee, I requested that they reschedule it, and they were kind enough to do that. The meeting took place on Thursday, February 1st, and the following people are on the Capital Committee: TJ Plant, Kevin Kennedy, Chris Signoli, Pat Sullivan, Pete Garvey, myself, Lindsay Hackett, Brian Connors, and Jennifer Wisher, who works in the finance department. The way it works is that there's 10 minutes each, presentations made by school, police, fire, dispatch, Echo Dev, DPW, libraries, parks and facilities, and the Department of Capital Assets Planning. It was interesting to be in the meeting because we've never been in it before that I know of, or I've never been in it. And I was like the kid on the block who didn't really know exactly how it worked. But basically, my report to you guys is there is a good process, a process that most other people are familiar with that I'm not familiar with, of separating and prioritizing projects. I will say there were a few things that came up in the meeting. I'll just mention a couple different projects. If you're wondering how many projects there are about 400, somewhere in that range. Many of them are not anywhere near getting started or high enough priority, but many others are projects that we talk about here on a regular basis. For instance, Brightwood, Lincoln, the replacement of those two schools got talked about in the Finance Committee meeting, Homer, DeBerry, etc. A couple new things that were important, I think, and I'm obviously not going to go through all the meetings, but or all the projects. The meeting was about an hour and a half. But a couple things that are worth mentioning. The next fire department or fire substation that needs replacing is 16 acres. So that was talked about. One of the big things that was talked about, there were two new department heads there. Commissioner B.J. Calvi of the fire department, and also, I'm missing his name, Jeremy, I think it's Jeremy, the new guy that runs dispatch. I'm sorry, I didn't write his name down. He was very helpful in talking about dispatch and integrating dispatch in with the fire and police. And there was a lot of talk, I'll read directly from a note, a lot of talk about dispatch and the coordination within fire and police and the need to upgrade technology. I think a lot of us have talked about 911 service, et cetera. That was all wrapped up into that. Some other things that came up were like Water Shops Pond, draining that, and any plans on that, and other projects of that nature. So my report really is that I attended the meeting, and I think that the tip for us as counselors is that sometimes things will come up that we want or wish were going on in our ward, is this park or this school or this road project or whatever. And I would basically say that there is an excellent process from what I could observe from the city. And I think it's incumbent on us to get a list of all the projects that are there and make sure any of your projects that are things that are important to you are on the list. Because we sometimes have things come up here at the council meeting, and it's not an ideal time to talk about things. So I will try to get, or have the finance team send around a copy of those projects so you can see if your pet projects are on there. Doesn't mean they're going to get done, just means at least they're on the list. So that's my report.
Thank you for that report. All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other reports of committee? Councilor Ryan.
Just briefly, Mr. President, we had tonight two Finance Committee meetings. The first one was with the internal auditor, and he met with us for half an hour. Councilor Hurst, Councilor Allen, and Councilor Fenton were present, and he gave us his view as to what the Office of the Internal Auditor is doing, and his goals, and his office's goals for the next calendar year. And there's a written report as well. In addition, we met from 5:30 to 6:30, an hour and 15 minutes, with respect to all of the financial items that are on tonight. Again, the same counselors, and we were joined by the city solicitor, the assessor, CAFO, TJ Plant, and we went over all of these items that are on tonight, and I think rather than go into them one by one, we'll just take them up as they appear on the agenda.
Thank you. All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Public Safety Committee held a meeting on Tuesday, January 30th. I was joined by Councilor Ryan, who was on the committee, as well as Councilor Allen and Councilor Letterman. Commissioner Barbieri was in attendance, and he gave us a general update as to the status of the police department in anticipation of the casino. He also talked a bit about the new data that he had just had a press conference on earlier that morning, the statistics that show that crime in general is improving in the city. In addition to that, we had a discussion around the disciplining of officers in the recent cases that have received a lot of media attention, and so there still are some remaining questions regarding those two particular issues that hopefully will get answered in the near future. One thing that I will say is that I'm excited that Commissioner Barbieri has committed to having regular monthly meetings on the last Tuesday of the month. And so my hope is that we didn't even get to the end of our agenda, and I think there's a lot to talk about when it comes to public safety in the city of Springfield. So I was excited to report that he is committed to having meetings so that we can all be transparent and certainly answer the concerns of our constituents.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Casino Oversight Committee met on 2 occasions last week. At those meetings at various points were my colleagues, Councilor Gomez, Councilor Letterman, Councilor Edwards, Councilor Hurst, Councilor Ryan, and Councilor Allen. At the first meeting, we discussed with the CAFO, TJ Plant, the financing that is expected to come in and has already come in as a result of the MGM Casino. The consensus of that report is that after absorbing all of those funds and putting them into the general fund, we're still at around a $12 million deficit for next year's budget and every budget thereafter moving forward. So we were alarmed at that result and asked Mr. Plant to do some follow-up due diligence, and we'll meet again in February to discuss that point. The second meeting, we met with Commissioner Carlton Harris to discuss some of my interest and concern about smoking as it relates to casino gaming. We were assured that there will be no vaping or smoking allowed on the casino floor. However, there will be designated smoking areas, of which there are currently 5 proposed locations on the casino site to allow that. So we've asked the Law Department and Commissioner Carlton Harris to do some further follow-up on those sites and the way that it interacts with some of the changing state law on the issue, and to report back. Second half of that meeting, we met with Phil Dromey and the Planning Department to talk about what's known as the blue zone in areas immediately abutting the casino and creative ways that we can foster economic development in that area. I will have a report and some proposals to make to the council on that matter before summer.
All in favor of accepting the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Are there any other reports of committee? Item number 1, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 1 is the December Revenues versus Expenditure Report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tonight you have the December Revenue Expenditure Report. This is the halfway point of the fiscal year. As I mentioned in the Finance Committee meeting, we do have some concerns on the revenue side, and we're closely monitoring a few items there.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving the report, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Item number 2 is a report and recommendation from the Board of Public Works regarding the installation of electronic facilities on a light pole located at the intersection of Dwight Street and Taylor Street. The recommendation is to approve.
Good evening, councilors. Chris Signoli, DPW Director. The one item in front of you tonight has been submitted by Mobility. I believe in December they had a meeting with the Board of Public Works. What they are proposing to do is install antenna and other equipment on a city traffic signal and light pole at the corner of Dwight and Taylor Street. As the DPW Director, I do not support this at all. I do not want these materials on our pieces of equipment that we have to service and deal with, whether we are talking about knockdowns or traffic signals. It has been approved by the Board of Public Works and referred to the council for this evening.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Signoli, who owns those poles?
We do.
So if
it's a traffic signal pole with a electric, a street light on top of it. We own it.
So if we own the poles, it doesn't matter whether or not we approve some type of zoning permission for the installation of something in the right-of-way, they still need a lease to go on our equipment. So
I don't want it at all, because I don't want to have to deal with that equipment on our poles.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilor Letterman.
Can you just explain to me what is this equipment that they want to install?
They're basically wireless repeaters. They are going in, I'm not even going to hazard a guess, there might be 10 to 12, maybe even more, that have already been approved around the city. They've been installed throughout the city, I'm going to say almost exclusively on Eversource poles around the city. They started, it was probably about 6 months ago, they came in front of the council because they wanted to install their own poles. However, their poles, I believe, were 70-something feet tall, that we have not allowed in the city, but there has been allowance for Eversource, to them be placed on the Eversource poles. Excuse me. This is the one in the downtown area that they want to attach to one of ours.
And what's the purpose of the equipment? You told me what it was.
It's their equipment. They're basically wireless repeaters that they're putting in the downtown area. Other than that, with the plan that was submitted, they're installing a lot of material and equipment that I really don't know too much about on our equipment, that I really don't want my technicians to have to deal with.
Yeah, I'm still failing to understand what a wireless repeater is.
Yeah, basically, it's to allow, what they had explained to us previously is that they're going to be installing these wireless repeaters, renting the usage to various entities, whether you're talking about Sprint or anything else that happens to be in the downtown area, that they will be allowed, that they want to be able to have wireless signals throughout the city, basically.
And they currently exist, Eversource has allowed them to place them on poles they own.
Correct.
We have not yet allowed them to sell. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Ryan.
Mr. Signoli, have they offered to pay us any money?
I haven't even gotten to that point. I really don't want any money.
Okay, well, if they make us an offer, we'd consider it.
You know, us Italians do things like that. Yes, I understand, but...
But right now, there's no money coming to the city for this.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We haven't got to that point. My issue, as I said, is we have to deal with these traffic signals all the time and work on them on a daily basis, and I don't want to have to work around somebody else's equipment to be able to do that.
Any other questions, comments? Councilor Gomez.
Would this be the very first time they would use our poll for this?
Yes. All others have been either on their own, to the best of my knowledge, or on Eversource polls.
Thank you.
Mr. Signoli, again, your recommendation is to deny?
Deny it. Yes. My request is.
Councilor Walsh.
Does this mean that we're denying people the capability to use their wireless?
There are a number of them in the downtown area that they're attempting to install. This just happens to be one in this particular area. They could propose on other poles, locations, buildings that are available. If they were to, you know, our recommendation at one time was to go to a building, they said, well, we have to pay rent. Well, there's other opportunities in the area to complete what they want to do.
Now, they've come to us before.
Yes.
A while
Yes.
ago and never was resolved.
Correct. Through the Board of Public Works, because their installations have been basically, as I said before, on existing Eversource poles. They need our approval through the Board of Public Works to install the utility.
Thank you.
Councilor Allen.
Yeah, Mr. Signoli, is there, one question, is there a loss of functionality by, obviously there is if we don't approve this, but can the ultimate clients get that functionality another way?
Well, that was my discussion way back with them, is there are other locations that they can put this in the area. They just choose to put it there because it'll be the easiest and the cheapest. You know, we have cameras throughout downtown and equipment throughout downtown on buildings, and we have deals with business owners to utilize their space. They just want to install it on our pole because it's the easiest. There are other locations, they just chose not to do it.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Any motions, amendments? Seeing none. All in favor of receiving the report and adopting the recommendations, say aye. Aye. Oppose? No. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
A yes vote will be to receive the report and to adopt the report's recommendation. A no vote will be to reject the report's recommendation. A yes vote will allow them to install, will give them a permit to install these facilities, this equipment on the pole. A no vote will deny the petitioner the ability to make these installations.
Councilor Letterman on the motion.
Point of order. If we deny this tonight, could they come back at a later time with more information?
They could resubmit the petition.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs.
I will yield to the distinguished councilor.
I actually, hi Chris, I met with Mobility on January 31st. They had a roundtable in Worcester, and their plan is to work with localities to get as many locations as possible. So I've been in contact with a gentleman named Eric Calio, and he's sending me examples, sample agreements that they have with other localities. So not to tell the council what to do, but if you deny it tonight, I'm actually in contact with Eric, and they will resubmit their petition and go through the process. They'll be fine with that.
Councilor Edwards.
Would it be terribly inconvenient or
inappropriate for us to send this to the appropriate committee from further and give the attorney enough time to be able to come back and give us answer the questions related to finance and exactly what Mobility is going to be doing in other locations throughout the city.
If you would like to find that in the form of a motion, I will accept the motion.
I'd like to put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Edwards, seconded by Councilor Letterman. All in favor of sending the matter to committee, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Oh.
The ayes have it. The matter will be sent to the Maintenance and Development Subcommittee.
Item number 3 is a Health Services for the Homeless grant in the amount of $2,205,784.
Good evening, councilors. Helen Carlton Harris, Commissioner, Division of Health and Human Services, City of Springfield. This is our annual grant that we receive from HRSA to fund our health services for our health center staff. It funds 3 RNs, 3 nurse practitioners, a psychiatrist, a full-time doctor, a part-time chief medical officer, billing staff, fiscal manager, clinic administrator, a full-time dentist, 2 dental hygienists, 2 registered dental hygienists, and we have 7 dental chairs in the city, and it funds 4 case managers. Our subcontract for this funds is Mercy Medical Center and Open Door, Open Pantry.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the grant, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Item number 4 is a Parks EEA grant in the amount of $1,560,000.
Good evening, Mr. President. I'm also here for items 17 and 31 through 40. This first item is for a grant from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs it's a 3-year grant, $500,000 a year roughly, and it's to plant trees in the McKnight, Old Hill, and Upper Hill neighborhood. They're currently at a canopy cover of 13%, and we have 16 acres at 50%, Forest Park at 45%, and it goes down from there. But this is the 3 lowest neighborhoods with a tree canopy cover, and it'll go start the process for our resiliency program, getting trees planted in these 3 neighborhoods.
Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Shea.
If I may, is this separate? I saw we have a program to reestablish the elm trees in Springfield.
That's separate, yes.
I'm sorry?
That is a separate program.
Separate
program?
program?
The elm program is separate.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the grant, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. President, can we take the other items? Mr. Sullivan is here, that I mentioned, I think 17 and...
Without objection, item number 17.
Item number 17 is a bond authorization for the DeBerry Elementary School feasibility study in the amount of $1.5 million.
This is to study the program along with the MSBA, and we had met in subcommittee on this item.
Councilor Allen. Councilor Ryan.
President, we met a short while ago, and TJ Plant was there, but he explained that if we don't move forward on this tonight, well, why don't you explain further?
Thank you, Councilor. So the bond authorization we're asking for is to do the feasibility study of replacing both DeBerry and Homer and doing it similar to what we're doing with Brightwood and Lincoln, which is going to be a separate schools, but with shared space, common space, as a way to kind of maximize efficiencies. This is the next step that we authorized the $1.5 million. It allows Peter Garvey and his shop to start doing the due diligence to see if there's a site that's suitable for, that can accommodate, approximately 300 to 400 students in each of the schools. It's the next step in MSBA's process to be invited to fully participate in their reimbursement program.
Could you explain the timing on this?
So on February 26th is a MSBA vote, and that they're going to vote to the next step to allow us to enter into feasibility. And so what they want us to show is that we have the funding in place, that we're serious enough to go down that direction and to actually start studying and doing some preliminary design work. So this vote allows us to get approval from the MSBA on the meeting on the 26th.
Mr. President. Mr. Platt, did I understand you correctly that Homer and DeBerry would share a common area? Are we building two schools together at this point?
Yeah, so the
Where?
MSBA is looking to maximize resources. So we have a lot of projects before the MSBA for schools of replacement. They're in the 1800s, early 1900s. So they came to us and asked us to do a replacement. If it's possible to do two schools like we have at Chestnut with, two separate principals and everything, then you share the cafeteria, the auditorium, all that shared space, but you have completely separate facilities with some common area.
So where would it be located?
That's part of the feasibility, is determine suitable site that's suitable to house those schools. It will, obviously be in the neighborhood, and it shouldn't impact the boundary as set up by the school committee.
So who's on that feasibility committee?
Excuse me?
Who's on that feasibility committee?
We're going to go out to bid for an architect and a designer. It's going to be run through Peter Garvey's shop, Capital Asset Construction, in coordination with the MSBA.
Okay, and as much as it's in my district, those two schools.
Correct.
I would like to have some input into locations.
We'll definitely be doing, the whole process is there'll be a lot of public input as we're doing right now. So right now we're with Brightwood and Lincoln, and we're going through all the public presentations and getting feedback. That's how we ultimately chose the site for Brightwood. We'll do a very similar process with a lot of public input.
Thank you.
Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. I just want to mention a couple other things about this item. I'm in support of the item, but I think there's some other financial information that needs to be people need to have. In the Finance Committee meeting, we talked about this item. We have already done the same type of thing for the North End schools, Lincoln and Brightwood. So item 17 today, authorizing $1.5 million bond authorization. It's a good idea to do it, but here's some information. When we did this for the North End schools, it was $1 million. So it's gone up $500,000 to do this. And this is not reimbursable unless we go forward and build. So if for some reason we have some financial crisis and we can't afford to build, then we eat the $1.5 million ourselves. If we go forward and build, then it becomes part of the total cost of the project. There's nobody here who wants to ever vote against building a school, but we need to know how much they're going to cost, because we know that the MGM money is not going to save the financial the city financially. It's wonderful to get it, but our needs continue to go up. So just so you know, what we're looking at is that these two double schools, if you will, one in the North End is supposed to be built on Roberto Clemente soccer fields next to Chestnut Middle School. I hope I'm saying that right. I think that, and the one in the Mason Square area, as Councilor Twigg just said, isn't decided yet where that will go. But the total cost of just to give you some context, we just built Brookings School, and that was $27 million thereabouts. To build these four schools, each double school is $85 million. So that's $170 million to build all four schools. So if we just multiplied Brookings 4 times 27, it would be only 108 or 110 or something. So the cost of these things is astronomical. And when we say we're getting 80% reimbursement, and correct me if I'm wrong, TJ, I just want everybody to know. So that would mean if you spent $100,000 or $100 million on these two schools, we get 80 million back. But the cost per square foot of a construction project in Springfield now is $500 a square foot, and the MSBA only reimburses up to $333 a square foot. So it ends up to be 50-50. The 80-20 thing doesn't really work anymore because they have a cap on the construction cost per square foot. So Councilor Ryan is Chair of Finance. I was in there for the meeting. We should go forward with this tonight. But we all have to have our eyes open at some of the costs that are coming. Some of those projects I was talking about before on the capital plan, you know, expensive. And we're in with them already. And these 4 schools need to get rebuilt. But we also are redoing our pension plan, funding schedule, et cetera. So just so you know, there's the 80% reimbursement in reality is 50%. So $180 million schools, if we build them both, we'll be paying $90 million out of city money and $90 million from the state. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Fair enough? Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean, that's entirely accurate. It's one of those MSBA, it sounds great saying it's an 80-20 or a community that's eligible for 80% reimbursement, but they have the nuance of all the caps. And when the caps are, when construction costs are low, it works out fine. Putnam and even Brookings were those 2 schools that kind of came in where construction costs were close enough. But now the 333 cap and the roughly $500 a square foot to build automatically puts the city on the hook for a lot more than we anticipated. Right. So put it in perspective, I was planning roughly 20 to 25 million in my head of bonding capacity, and now it's turning into more 40, 45 million for what the city's going to have to pay. Now, I got the same sticker shock that I believe the council's getting right now, and I sat down with the superintendent to start trying to value engineer stuff out to make it more affordable. But the way it's designed and the cohorts and the stuff that you could take out is not the stuff we want to take out, and so it would only save $2 million, like pre-K pre-K spaces and also low incidence special education. That's stuff that we actually want to fund because we're doing in-house, in-district special ed education. It saves us a lot of money, and pre-K, we all know, read by 3rd grade and all those things that preschool does for our kids. So, and if we took that out, it probably would have saved me $2 million. Penny wise, pound foolish. So we've done our due diligence. I've met with my finance team and Lindsay, the budget director, and we actually are starting to map out how can we afford all this if all this comes to fruition. And the good news is we've structured our debt in a way that we have affordability in the out years. And by the time that we would bond and ban and pay for it, it's not as daunting as it was probably the same way you guys responded when you hear that. I still think it's a fundamental flaw that they say it's 80-20 and it's not 80-20, but that's something we got to take up with the legislature and with the MSBA itself.
I mean, that may be something, Mr. President, that we take up with the legislature or ask to meet with our delegation or something, because we're paying for every square foot, we're paying $167. We're paying, we're getting 80% of 333, but that next 167 is all on us per square foot. So it's a bigger topic, but I just wanted to say it tonight. I'm in full support of this tonight. We need to rebuild these schools, but we have to rebuild them with our eyes open to our financial responsibilities.
Councilor Ash is the chairman of the State and Federal Relations Committee, and so that may be something that you want to consider discussing in subcommittee. Councilor Gomez.
Excuse me, a little bit under the weather. In the process so far getting up to this point, just to give a little bit of insight with what's going on with the Brightwood and Lincoln, we've had 3 community meetings, one at the neighborhood board, one at Brightwood Library, and then the other one we had it at Lincoln School. Also, Climate Justice Coalition has met with Peter Garvey on actually, how to make these schools and for the future to go green. And operating these big schools, going green and looking into the future on solar and emissions, especially down in the north end with the highway, the train tracks, all of that stuff pertaining to our students is a plus. I'm happy that my colleague Tim Allen made us aware and understanding that the money part is a big piece of it, but also the longevity of when it's how much it's gonna cost to operate these big structures too. But with community input, specifically with PVPC, and making sure we move forward collectively together for both of these projects, because remember these 4 schools are, if you put them all together, almost 200 years old, or probably even more. in Brightwood and Lincoln alone are 100 years old apiece. These kids eat lunch in their room. They have gym inside of the hallways. These projects are necessary for them to thrive in the future, you know, with their social needs. And that's something that I'm in favor of the project. You know, the location is something that, you know, is another question because of, you know, the where exactly it's put. And we at our maintenance and development meeting, to give credit to our colleague, our chairman, that's not with us, Marcus Williams, we also asked, you know, where exactly we're going to be putting the location we're going to be putting the school for Homer and DeBerry. When you look at, you know, where these locations and where's the need, we really don't have a lot of land to put these structures on. So then when we look past it, we start looking at our open space. We start looking at stuff that already we fought for to have, and we're also putting those things at risk also, regardless, because they're not park space and they're owned for the city. It's still space that we're risking to put these structures on, and how are we going to give that back to our community? So we're definitely in a hard place when trying to get this community input and trying to figure out, you know, what's best for both of these communities. But education is always a must. But aside from that, we have to also look at our social needs when it comes to these kids on the parks. We always talk about we're always for what's going on in Adams Park, what's going on in Calhoun, and going on in the north end and the south end. But realistically, what we're risking now when we build these schools, which is a concern of mine, is also we're looking at places that are green spaces that the community can utilize. But also what I do give Climate Justice Coalition kudos to is that, and also to the developer that you guys selected, is that these buildings and structures, they're already made to go green. So they're gonna, and it's up to the council when it does come up, if we're gonna go into a solar contract, that's another conversation. But these buildings are gonna be ready for that use, and I think that's the most positive thing about this structure, that we're moving forward and I guess getting ready to go on into the future to make sure that, you know, we're using renewable energy. So for the most part, I'm totally in support of this project. I know there's a lot more conversation to have pertaining. There's more. We're still waiting on for in next month. I guess we're putting in the application. Then we're going to hear back from. DESI, is it?
Correct. MSBA. February 26th.
February 26th, and they're going to be continuously having these community conversations. So I would feel that they're going to be doing the same thing up at Mason Square also when it comes to Homer and DeBerry.
Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to second Councilor Gomez's point, and I'm going to be voting in favor of this tonight. And I also wanted to speak to the President's point regarding taking this up with the state legislature, because, you know, the truth of the matter is, if you look at the average age of a Springfield school building, our infrastructure is just at an incredibly greater age than most of the state, really, as one of the oldest cities here in the Commonwealth. A conversation I had with the superintendent recently was of him speaking at a meeting of other superintendents about projects that they were moving forward, and superintendents in those meetings, you know, explaining that they were applying to rebuild buildings that were built in, you know, 1950, and, you know, our superintendent looking up and saying, yeah, well, one of mine was built in 1890, you know. These are the buildings that our children are being educated in. And, you know, as someone who grew up in Mason Square, had many neighbors and peers who attended Homer Street School and DeBerry Elementary School, I think we know that our community is in need of this, but at the same time, we should be having a fair shake with the state reimbursement. So I would really urge us to consider taking this up with the legislature, because we're in a bit of a special circumstance here in the city of Springfield with the age of our school buildings.
Councilor Shea.
Yeah, well, I guess it's a worn point now, but first off, at least 3 of these schools are over 100 years old. And these neighborhoods that they service, these children deserve state-of-the-art schools. But the other point, I think, we can always kick the can down the road because we're concerned, as Councilor Allen points out, the cost. But remember, right now we're at the 80% reimbursement, however you play that number. But a lot of cities and towns in Massachusetts only get a 50% reimbursement. And at some point, the state's going to say, we used to be at 90, they'll probably cut us back to 50. And the longer we wait, the more the cost of building those schools go up. So if we put this off and we don't act on it now, the future, when we have to deal with this, the cost of those schools will be greater than it is now if we're upset about that. And if, God forbid, if they reduce that 80 down to the 50%, that's going to be another burden. So while we may not want to act right away, I think we ought to at least put it in play and cement and lock in that 80% piece before that goes away.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, this is a financial order which, under our rules and orders, requires 2 separate votes. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On authorizing the bond, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Shay.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Gomez. Yes, Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ryan. Yes, Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved. Items 31 through 40, Mr. Clerk.
Items 31 through 40 are statements of interest for the submission of certain capital projects for Washington Elementary School, Talmadge School, Sumner Avenue School, the High School of Science and Technology, Milton Bradley School, Indian Orchard School, Glenwood, Harena, Commerce, and Balliet Elementary School.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is our yearly application to the MSBA for roof, window, and HVAC boiler projects, and we've had a very good success rate with these projects, and they are running roughly on an 80% reimbursement.
Any questions or comments from the council? Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know, Pat, that you have this statement of interest. How successful are you? Say, for example, with all these projects listed here tonight, realistically, how many of you?
I'm going to turn to TJ, but I think we're running about 80%, you know. No, I mean, so out of the 100% that we asked for, we get like 8, we'll get maybe 6 to 8 of the projects.
Do you send them down as priorities? Do you rank them?
We have the Harena is the priority. You have to pick one of the projects as a priority. So Harena HVAC system is the priority for this submission.
And the Sumner Avenue School, what is it?
It's a boiler.
Oh, boiler.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Gomez.
Which I'm very happy to hear that Harena is, the HVAC system is in.
This is our 3rd application for this, Council. Yep.
I just want to also emphasize that it's Tunnel B, the HVAC system within it itself. We still have some more work and some more things that need to get done with our delegation when it pertains to Tunnel A, which is where the leakage is. So I also, you know, in voting this, which I'm in full support of, I also still want to point out that there is some repairs and things that need to happen in Tunnel A so it can really open up that open space. But I just want to say, Pat and your team, you guys have been doing a phenomenal job. Thank you. And thank you for the team that put this on priority A when it comes to the students, because Tunnel B is basically the school and where the kids actually go to school from a day-to-day basis. But
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Shay.
Pat, if I could just ask you you mentioned on Sumner Avenue, the boiler. Now, unless I'm aging faster than I thought that that's a fairly new school that we rehabbed. When we rehabbed that school, did we not do the boiler?
It's interesting. The school was built 100 years ago. Those boilers went about 80 years, and these school buildings, your boilers last around 20 years.
When we rehabbed that school, Sumner Avenue, we did not replace the boiler. Is that correct?
I believe you did, but it's time. We have cracked cast iron in it. It's leaking. We're Band-Aiding it as we speak. We've lost it 3 times so far this winter.
I'm just curious. I mean, how long ago did we do that rehab? I mean,
About 22 years ago, maybe? 22?
That long?
Yep.
Wow. I mean,
But this is why...
I'm just thinking it was done last week. And
the other thing...
Where's our warranty? But
the other piece of this is we're through the ESCO project, we're putting really the Cadillac of boilers in, so those should go 30 to 50 years, if you will. So I think we're making better choices, Councilor, with all due respect to the past administrations.
it's interesting on the time, because when I first got on the school committee, the average age of a school building, I'm told, was 72. When I got off, we had built a lot of schools. Now my average age is around 72 in the school. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the statement of interest, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Back to our regular agenda, Mr. Clerk.
Item number 5 is the FY18 Council on Aging Grant in the amount of $210,348.82.
I don't believe we did item number 4 yet. Was that? It's item number 4 on my agenda. Is that correct?
I apologize. Item number 4 is the Parks EEA. I believe we just did item number 4.
We did item number 4. My apologies. Yeah.
Item number 5 is the FY18 Council on Aging Grant in the amount of $210,384.82.
Good evening. This is our Elder Affairs grant that comes from the Commonwealth, and it goes to the Department of Elder Affairs to support staff of that department.
Any questions or comments for the council? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the grant, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Do you have any other items on the agenda?
I do. 23 and 25 are all related to the Council on Aging and the Department of Elder Affairs.
If there's no objection from the council, Mr. Clerk.
23 is a order for free cash to Elder Affairs in the amount of $67,500.
The Department of Elder Affairs is seeking 3 new positions. One is an administrative assistant, one is a senior program coordinator, the other is a health and wellness coordinator. If any of you have had the opportunity to go to the new Raymond A. Jordan Senior Center, obviously there are some staffing needs that we need to fill, and these are 3 of them. We have a exercise center that needs a health and wellness coordinator. We need a supervisor to be able to oversee the center in terms of its staffing, and then an administrative assistant who can assist the director.
Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just want to say a couple things before we vote on this. While we've been sitting here, you all were handed a memo. Hopefully everybody got it. It looks like this. It's about the disposition of free cash. It says regarding fiscal year 17 certified free cash. So when we were in the Finance Committee meeting, we didn't have this memo, and there's on this agenda is moving a lot of free cash to different places. So I asked TJ and the Finance Committee to put a memo together. Thank you very much. This is exactly what I was looking for. So we have this tells the story that we got our certified free cash recently, within the last few weeks, of $6.4 million. And that's the money that is kind of surplus when you end a fiscal year, and then you can't use it until DOR certifies it. It takes 7 months for them to certify it thereabouts. So now you can see the picture. We got $6.4 million, and several of the items tonight are using some of that money, and it leaves some free cash at the end, $4.6 million. So just as you're voting on things tonight, good to see this. Normally, a large majority of this money goes to stabilization reserve. I don't know what the finance department's plans are. But just so you know that this free cash comes back to us, these are the recommendations of the city to us about how some of the money is spent. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, this is a financial order, which again requires 2 separate votes under Rule 19. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the transfer, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs. Councilor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton. Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes. More than sufficient. Transfer is approved.
Thank you.
Item 25 is an order to transfer $25,000 from free cash to the Department of Health and Human Services.
This is also related to the senior center. As you know, those of you that visited there, we have an industrial kitchen, we have a grand hall. We anticipate serving about 150 to 200 meals every day for lunch, and we need a vendor. And so Sodexo has been chosen to be the vendor for food services, but in order to have them begin, we need to pay for their staffing. We will be charging the seniors for their lunches as well, so we anticipate revenue. However, in the beginning, we need an infusion of cash to be able to begin.
Council Twiggs.
I guess one of the first committee commissioners and others within the city for an excellent job we did over the weekend and bringing forth the preliminary during senior center. Great set. I had the opportunity to go through it. I obviously support additional staff there. We seniors need staff people to assist us. The question relative to food, it's my understanding that most of the senior centers charge about $2 for lunch, and the Raymond A. Sullivan is charging $3.50. Is there going to be a big difference in terms of the meals, Commissioner?
So the senior centers in the past were charged $2.50, and they were charged $2.50 by Greater Springfield Senior Services. As you know, we held a taste testing with our seniors at the Carriage House. We had folks come, taste the food, let us know what they thought about the food, and we gave them menus and really did ask about the pricing. So the meals were anywhere from $3 to $4. Our seniors who came to that taste testing decided that $3.50 was appropriate for the meal that they tested and that they found to be just outstanding, those that were at the testing. So yes, it's going to be $1 more than what they are currently paying, but again, we worked with the seniors to come up with that fee and asked them really questions about nutritional value we are concerned about seniors in terms of their, health overall and wellness, and we were able to come to some closure. But we did involve the seniors in that process.
Well, I appreciate that, Commissioner. If the meals are going to be anyway in relationship at the meal that you serve on Saturday, I'd gladly pay $3.50 for it.
We'll expect to see you at lunchtime.
Oh, you will.
All right, perfect.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Roll call.
On approving the transfer, Counselor Williams, absent. Counselor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Shay.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ash. Yes. Counselor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ryan. Yes. Counselor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Transfer is approved.
Thank you, counselors.
Thank you. Items 6 through 10, Mr. Clerk.
Items 6 through 10. Item 6 is a DPW infrastructure grant in the amount of $37,500. Item number 7 is the FY18 Student Awareness Grant in the amount of $13,616. Item number 8 is the Mass Literacy Champion Grant in the amount of $2,000. Item number 9 is the Springfield Cultural Council Library Grant in the amount of $2,000. And item number 10 is the Elder Affairs Donation in the amount of $2,000.
Good evening, councilors. Item number 6 for the DPW is a grant that we're getting from the Office of Environmental Affairs. It's going to allow us to develop our green infrastructure standards along with our resiliency program that we're doing in the city.
All in favor of accepting the grant, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
Item number 11 is an order authorizing the confirmation of the reappointment of Young No as the Director of Internal Audit.
Good evening, councilors. Young No, Director of Internal Audit. First, I want to thank the mayor for the opportunity to serve another 3 years as Director of Internal Audit, and I look forward to continuing the department's work in promoting transparency, accountability, and improving processes in city government.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. No, as well for your service. I just want to speak in favor of the auditor's appointment. This council will remember that after a selection process about 3 years ago, sort of similar to Councilor Shea's point, time really does fly. It feels like we just did that. We were very excited to have Mr. No apply and agree to leave his employment at a CPA firm and join us as the Director of Internal Audit. Very happy to report that after that process, Mr. No complied with the residency ordinance. Very excited to report that. And as the former chair of the audit committee in 2 of the past cycles, I had the pleasure of working with him. I found him to be very candid, very capable, and truthful in all of his reports to this body. So I'm excited that he's continuing and that the mayor has offered his appointment here tonight.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Councilor Allen.
I would just like to echo what Councilor Fenton said. Mr. No made a report to us today. He was very professional. It's not an easy job because it's tough things to provide oversight to areas that maybe don't want oversight or might need some more oversight than they want. But I think Mr. No brings a level of thoroughness, competence, and respect to the position. I endorse his reappointment.
Any other questions, comments? All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Call, Mr. Clerk.
On confirming the reappointment of Mr. No, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twigs.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes for Mr. No.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Rash. Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Reappointment is confirmed. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item number 12 is an order authorizing the expenditure of Mass Gaming Commission grant for valet parking program and amendment to the agreement between the city and the Springfield Parking Authority.
Good evening, Council. This is an amendment to the grant that was submitted to the Mass Gaming Commission to extend the valet parking program in the South End. We've had tremendous success with the program. It's funded by the mitigation money or the funding through the Mass Gaming Commission, and we're looking for support.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the order, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twigs. Yes. Councilor Shea. Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh. Yes. Councilor Fenton. Yes. Councilor Letterman. Yes. Councilor Edwards. Yes. Councilor Ash. Yes. Councilor Hurst. Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved.
Item number 13 is an order authorizing the execution of a personal property tax agreement with Citizens Pinevale Solar.
Good evening, Mr. President and honorable councilors. My name is Richard J. Allen, 94 Pondview Drive in Springfield. I'm the chairman of the Board of Assessors. I'm pleased to present to you this evening 2 solar taxation agreements, both with the same developer, same owner of the personal property, same owner of the real estate. I should note that the real estate is not yet transferred to the proposed landowner. The real estate is some land, a 21-acre parcel out in Indian Orchard and a 17-acre parcel out in Indian Orchard. And the city is the owner of both tracts of land that are the subjects of items number 13 and 14, Pinevale and Oak. The agreements as proposed encompass 4% depreciation over a 25-year period. In one case where we have 8,600 panels to be erected, the average payment is approaching $32,000 over the 25 years. And the other development, the Pinevale, where the number of panels is closer to 7,600, the average payment over the 25 years is approximately $29,000. These agreements are pursuant to authority which the council granted the Board of Assessors back in December. You may recall we were here proposing that you confer authority on us to negotiate these agreements. That is pursuant to a very specific provision in state law, Chapter 59, Section 38H, which concerns power generating companies and the need for power generating companies to know their tax certainty over a period of years and for the city to be assured of reliable payments over the period of time, whether it's 20 or 25 years. That provision of state law has only been on the books about 20 years. When the electric industry was deregulated, it had back in 1997, had a very destabilizing effect on the municipal finances of several communities around the state that relied on generating plants as major components of their tax levy, and consequently the legislature saw fit to establish this negotiating authority, and I think it's worked well. These would be the second and third examples of this in Springfield. The first was with Citizens on a piece of land over at the Chicopee-Springfield line. And that was 2014, I believe, we presented that. So we're very pleased with the proposals for Oak and for Pinevale, and our experience with Citizens Energy has been stellar. They're a first-class developer, and we think that by providing the Citizens Energy, the power developer, with these agreements, that would enable them to go forward with the agreements they have to get into place with regard to the land, and would allow the landowner to know that they have a tenant for that land, and therefore would proceed with the purchase of the land from the city. I should note that those land transfers would require city council approval, is my understanding. So those will be back to you in the near future, I anticipate.
Any questions?
Happy to entertain any questions.
Councilor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. President. So it sounds like these two agreements really are beneficial to many people, not just the city, correct?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Citizens Energy will, use this power and allow it to access the grid and power several hundred homes each. One of these is a 2-megawatt project. The other one's a 2.25. We have other solar developments in Springfield, as you know, there's been a tremendous effort at the state level to encourage the creation and development of solar facilities, and this is part of that whole process.
I was happy to hear your recommendation of the developer, because I think we've had dealings with them and they have all been stellar too. Thank you.
Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, would it be appropriate for the developer to come forward and just tell us a little bit about their project, their technology, and what they plan to do with the site?
Hello, Council. Roger Roberge, the proposed landowner, if the pilot goes through. To speak to the question, the proposed development here, the two sites in question, the first site is the north-south Oak Street parcel, approximately 20-acre site. It's the old Crane Foundry. It's a capped landfill. There is requirements from the EPA and the DEP in terms of maintenance of that cap to keep it environmental compliance. The one of these things that happens, the highest and best usage of land of that is lately been solar farm developments. There's a 30-year compliance period post-cap closure where there are strict maintenance components, testing, maintenance of the cap that are required for that 30 years to make sure that the cap is properly maintained. That's the number one inherent problem with the Oak Street parcel. Although it is a 20-acre parcel, cap landfill. The other parcel, the east-south Pineville Street parcel, is the old Chapman Valve, part of the Chapman Valve campus. That site also had some environmental issues as well. Most recently was Mass DEP cleanup as well there with some surface area waste, and there's some limitations on development on that parcel as well. Proposed development there is for a mixed use. There's some solar and some urban agricultural usage there. The RFPs were put out by the city. Mr. Murphy and myself were the sole bidders on both those RFPs. They've been out to RFP, I think, previously a couple of times on a number of occasions. And our proposal there is to put these properties back on the tax roll, to make them a beautiful part of the Indian Orchard area, not just a vacant, unused land. You put them back on the tax rolls and do something good for the community at the same time.
That's great, Mr. Revision. Could you just speak a little bit to the solar development itself and how much electricity it'll produce, how many homes or businesses that could potentially serve, and what the model there is?
I think Attorney Dunn here would be the best representative to speak to that on behalf of the citizen, who's the actual solar developer for that part of the project.
Yeah, Martin Dunn, Attorney, Holyoke, Massachusetts, representing citizens who would be the developer of this project. The project that includes on Pineville, the Citizens Pineville Solar Project would involve approximately 2.0 megawatts of power generated there, and the Citizens Oak Street Solar would involve 2.25 megawatts worth of power being generated there. Citizens, as you might know, Citizens Energy is located in Boston. Their primary purpose is to render fuel assistance or provide fuel assistance for low-income families. In doing that, they needed to diversify their funding efforts and their revenue-raising efforts. They did so by moving out into the solar development field. So they have various solar developments throughout the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and even throughout the country. And what they do is the monies that they realize from solar development, they funnel back into Citizens Energy for assistance for low-income families. Just for the sake of reference, there's a solar development that they have on Granby Road in Chicopee behind the Elks Lodge. They have a solar development in Westfield on the old landfill. They have a solar development in Whately. They have a solar development in Holyoke, and the Chicopee Industrial Park in Springfield. They've done so. One of the things I like to state representing them is that they are local. They won't be selling these developments off to any developer. They stand by their projects. They've been here for many, many years, and you'll be dealing with them for years and years to come. So we think it's a win-win. It's the creation of clean energy. It allows lands that are contaminated, so to speak, and difficult to develop a purpose, and that's what they're doing. These solar developments are very much focused now, tax credit-wise, et cetera, on brownfields, on landfills, et cetera, and this fits all of those requirements. So they're excited about the project, and they think that the agreement, they've got a great rapport with the city assessor's office, Mr. Allen and his staff, and they look forward to working with the city for many years to come.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Attorney Dunn. And I plan to vote in favor of this. I think I'm excited to see another solar development here in the city of Springfield. There's many of us on this body I know that support us moving in the direction of further sustainability, moving away from fossil fuels and things that are polluting our atmosphere, polluting our environment, and creating a better world for the future. So very excited. Also would mention too, I think this is very much in line with the Climate Action and Resiliency Plan that was adopted by the city earlier this year, a document that was very important to me prior to my election to this body. So I would encourage councilors to consider this and vote yes.
Councilor Ash.
Mr. President, just briefly, I rise in support of this project. I think we've had a good relationship with Citizen Corporation and the Kennedy family over the last several years, and furthermore, having someone like Attorney Marty Dunn, who's a local person, I think we can have further comfort that the job is going to be a good one, and it's going to benefit the families that really need that extra care. So certainly encourage my colleagues to vote in support of this.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, we were joined earlier by the president of the Indian Orchard Council, but she had to leave. I do have a letter here from the Indian Orchard Citizens Council, which reads, "To whom it may concern, the Indian Orchard Citizens Council recommends the approval of Roger Roberge and Company permit request for the development of 2 parcels of land off of Oak and Pineville Streets for solar panels, raised bedfruit orchard, and community garden and storage units. Sincerely, the IOCC."
Mr. President, I didn't get that name. You said it was Roger who?
Roberge, R-O-B-E-R-G-E. All right, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Number 13.
This is item 13. On approving the agreement, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twigs.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved. Item number 14.
Item number 14 is an order authorizing the execution of a personal property tax agreement with Citizens Oak Street Solar.
All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Roll call.
On approving the agreement, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twigs. Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved. Thank you.
Item number 15 is an order authorizing a tax exemption agreement with 3 Chestnut LLC.
This item concerns a development of market rate housing in downtown Springfield, 122 Chestnut. It was the YMCA building many decades ago and was developed into market rate housing about 30 years ago or so by a couple of local parties. And in recent years, it's grown a little tired and needing some investment and upgrading. And we're fortunate to have a local developer, actually a New York City-based developer that has been investing in Springfield. Silverbrick is the name of the ownership, and they acquired and renovated Silverbrick Loss, formerly known as Morgan Square, a few years ago, and they recently acquired title to 122 Chestnut, and at the end of December, and we're pleased to present tonight a proposal for a tax agreement with them, which would allow the phasing in of the additional value created by their investment above and beyond the base valuation. This project has 99 existing units, and they're proposing to renovate those and to add another 15 market rate units for a total of 114 units, all of which would be market rate. And they paid $4.8 million to acquire this. I know they've been before the council and other city bodies seeking different regulatory approvals. And we're pleased to present this evening an agreement pertaining to the $6.2 million of additional investment above and beyond their acquisition price. That 6.2 represents what they would spend on renovation and creation of additional 15 units. It's a 10-year agreement. It's heavy in the early years, heavy exemption in the early years when they're doing the work, and they have some construction financing. Over time, as they complete units and move people around within the building, the exemption level declines, and the last 4 years of the project are at 25%, 25%, 10%, and 10%. So essentially, we're anticipating a lot of new value there, and by year 11, it will be fully taxed. So this is a very strong project to bring market rate housing to downtown Springfield. I think it's something that the administration's been seeking to create for a number of years, and I think with the economic vitality in Springfield associated with the casino and the Chinese rail facility and a host of other projects, developers are starting to recognize that Springfield has unmet demand for market rate housing. So I would encourage your adoption of this proposal tonight. With me this evening is Sarah Bollier with Silverbrick. So if you have questions for the developer, I'm sure she'll be able to address those.
Mr. President.
I would yield to Councilor Twiggs.
Councilor Twiggs.
Now, it is my understanding that 99 units would be done in the old YFC building, which was located at 122 Chestnut Street. And I think the commissioner mentioned that there's going to be another 15 units. Where are they located?
They would be in the same building. When this was developed 35 years ago into market rate housing, they also at the time utilized some of the former Y space as health club and storage and locker facilities and so forth. And they're going to reduce the amount of space devoted to that and add 15 units in some of that space.
So all of the units will be located right there?
All in the same building. We're just going to pick up another 15 on top of the existing 99.
Now, this agreement, this tax agreement, means that they would pay us less at the end, but you say it's being reduced to 25, 25, 10, 10. What does that mean?
Right, it's a 10-year agreement. Agreements can be as short as 5 or as long as 20. This would be the second of its type in Springfield, a second housing agreement.
That's why I don't understand it.
Right. And the early years were heavier on relief as proposed in the agreement to recognize that they're doing construction and they have some vacant units. So the year one, which would start July 1st of this year, would be, the increment would be 100% exempt in year one.
So the exempts start at the top?
Right. We start with a heavier exemption and greater savings to them, and then over time, as the project stabilizes and achieves full occupancy, that the exemption dwindles in the later years.
So what is the total amount of the agreement?
It's projected that their savings would be about $250,000 over the 10 years. The additional investment, above their acquisition price, the additional investment is over $6 million, $6.2 million. And I wanted to note that by approving this, that would enable the developer to proceed with tax credits at the state level as well. Which would be additional savings to contribute to the viability of the project.
Thank you.
Councilor Fender.
Thank you, Mr. President. I attended the Finance Committee meeting earlier this evening, chaired by Councilor Ryan, where we discussed this matter. I'm opposed to this tax incremental financing plan because I don't believe that it satisfies the mandatory but-for analysis. That is to say that but for these tax incentives, the project would not move forward. I think there's compelling evidence to suggest that it would. This body approved a parking variance for this structure back in late 2017, and as many of my colleagues will recall, we had discussions at that time about the plan for this development and the substantial renovations that would be taking place. TIF was never mentioned as a part of those discussions. Additionally, unlike the earlier tax plan that we approved, wherein we authorized the chairman of the Board of Assessors to negotiate that agreement and were a party and aware of the fact that those negotiations would be taking place. It's my understanding, based on that committee meeting, that these negotiations with the current owner and developer of this site on Chestnut Street have been going on for several months, predating even those variance applications to this board. So I'm concerned about that. I also would like to point out to the body that this same owner, Silver Brick Lofts, was given, as was indicated, a similar HDIP tax incentive for the Morgan Square development, which by all standards they did a wonderful job with. But some of you may recall at the time that that tax plan was approved, I raised concerns about doing it after construction had already begun. Again, because of the fact that I didn't believe it would satisfy the but-for analysis. So I'm not prepared to support it tonight. I would be open to further discussions in the Finance Committee, so I'm willing to make a motion to committee at this time. If it doesn't pass and people think that we should dispose of it this evening, then I will be opposed. So I'd like to make a motion that we refer this matter to the Finance Committee.
I'll second that motion.
Motion made by Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Allen to send the matter to the Finance Committee chaired by Councilor Ryan. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Item number 16 is an order authorizing the acceptance of a gift of land for the Springfield Public Schools Culinary Nutrition Center.
Good evening. Edward Pakula, City Solicitor. This is a donation for a property that abuts the site that we took by eminent domain for the purposes of the school department's nutrition center. We were actually using part of this abutting property, but the owner has agreed to donate it. It's about an acre, and this is just seeking your acceptance. It became a little complicated. We had a lot of legal work to do on it because it was registered land, but we're urging you to accept this so that we can move forward and make this project come to fruition.
Questions or comments from the council?
Yeah, we would gain that property through a quick claim deed.
Excuse me?
We would.
This is the property on Caldwell Drive.
I understand.
We took some property by eminent domain.
Okay.
And next door to it, we're having a little piece of that being donated to us.
We're getting it through a quick claim deed is my question.
Correct. And so this would it's for $1.
Yeah. So that's what's being given to us.
Correct.
We're paying a whole $1 for it.
That's correct. And it's about an acre of land.
I hope we don't go broke.
Any other questions or comments? None. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19 say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On accepting the land, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twigs.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Fenton, absent. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ash. Yes, Councilor Hurst. Absent, Councilor Ryan. Yes, Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes, Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Order is approved.
Item number 18 is an order authorizing a collective bargaining agreement with the Springfield Fire Chiefs Association.
Good evening, councilors. Bill Mahoney, Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations. This contract, I should say negotiations began for this series of contracts on January 25th, 2013. There were approximately 10 employees in the bargaining unit. We had 9 bargaining sessions and 3 mediation sessions. This is a series of 4 contracts covering July 1st, 2012 to June 30th, 2020. The last raise that these 10 employees had was on or about July 1, 2011. This is the only contract that goes that far back. Most of our other contracts are settled through 2016. You'll see, as I keep coming forward to you with contracts, we're settling into the 20s now. We've got contracts settling 2020, 2021. This is our long outstanding contract. Residency, all members promoted into the bargaining unit on or after February 1st, 18 are subject to the ordinance. This is different than the contract that was approved by the council for the IAFF, and the president of the IAFF is here tonight. They have a 10-year requirement to live in the city. These employees will just be subject to the ordinance going forward. So even if they have the 10 years, they satisfy the 10 years for the IAFF contract, which the city council has approved, these employees will have to live in the contract, have to live in the city, and they're subject to the ordinance of the city after that date. We added a social media policy. This is a contract, of course, that has been back before you before. One of the issues that came up was a social media policy. This is the first union of the 12 city unions to agree to a social media policy right out of the gate with us. I know some counselors were concerned about promotional opportunities, and I would just say that in my experience, I've been doing this for a long time, when contracts seem to languish, you don't see the vacancies or the retirements come up, but after you get them done, that's when people start saying, okay, it's now time for me to think about my retirement. We achieved getting the collateral duties in this contract, which are great. These are additional duties that are being added to each of the district chiefs. And then we clarified in this contract that the director of training will be paid at the district chief rate if they are a district chief. If they're not a district chief, they're paid at a lower rate.
Councilor Hurst.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Mullen, now, from the last time that this contract was before us, have there been any changes to it since we last rejected it?
Yes.
I think you highlighted a few. Can you just speak to those again?
Sure. The three were, there was in the residency requirement, the new date is February 1, 2018. The second one was adding the social media policy. And the third was the clarification of how we're paying the director of training if they're a district chief.
So I do want to commend you on the social media policy. It's long overdue, and the fact that you're one of the first unions to include it, I think goes a long way. You have stated previously that you are of the opinion that these district chiefs are in violation of the residency requirement, correct?
There's certainly contract language in there that references that that there is a requirement for residency in the contract. There is certainly an argument between the city and the union whether or not that language is applicable.
So, based off of the current contract that we have, you would agree that the district chiefs are in violation of the...
I would agree that there is language in the contract. I would not agree that they're in violation. I think that there's been a 30-year or so practice where that language has not been enforced and has not been tested.
So you do not believe they're in violation?
I think that's going to be subject to someone else deciding that issue.
Okay, all right. And I know Solicitor Pakula certainly is on record in the court of law saying that he believes that they're in violation. And that's not disputed. Since I just read the 52 pages of the last time that you guys were before the court, do you know if any of the district chiefs who were in violation of the residency requirement have moved back into the city since the last time you were before us?
I believe 3 of the district chiefs live in the city.
I guess I'm going to state my question again.
I don't know who's moved.
Okay, so you don't know whether any of the district chiefs who were in violation since this period of time that we've been debating this issue have moved in?
I don't know when the district chiefs have moved or haven't moved. I don't have that information.
Okay. How many district chiefs are there?
10.
There are 10. Okay. Why did I think there were 9? There are 10.
There's 10.
Okay. Do you know how many are currently still in violation of the residency ordinance?
I know that 3 live in the city and 7 do not.
Okay, so there are currently 7 who are in violation of the residency ordinance as the language states right now. There was one district chief who still had time to move into the city when this was last presented to us. Do you know if that particular district chief has since abided by the residency language in the contract? I think he had a year to move in, and I think he was in the...
I don't know, Counselor.
I'm sorry. Mr. Mahoney, it is your job to enforce the residency requirement, right?
Understood.
Okay, so you don't know whether this individual who had a year to move in, moved in or not?
No, because, again, the city hasn't done anything with the residency for probably 30 years, and that's what the issue is.
Okay.
So there's a past practice of not requiring anyone to live in the city that's been going on for 30 years, and that's the crux of the argument.
So you just stopped checking?
No, I didn't stop checking.
You had to have, because there's one who had a year to move in from the time in which we started these conversations, who was on notice that they were in violation of the residency requirement, and you don't know whether he's abided or not.
Right, because they're in a bargaining unit, they're not non-bargaining, and so it's a different animal.
Okay. What happens if, just generally, if somebody's in violation of the residency ordinance? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, we would bring them in and we'd say, where are you living now? And they'd say, well, they tell us if they're living in the city or not. If they say they're living in the city, we have a series of questions that we ask them, and we ask for a series of documents.
And then if they can't provide that documentation, and if you ultimately find out that they don't live in the city, what happens?
We tell them that they're in violation of the ordinance and they can resign or they're going to be terminated.
And they can resign or be what?
We'll terminate them.
Okay, so they have the option to resign?
Yeah.
Okay. So they come before you, you ask them a series of questions, you find out that they're in violation, and they have the option to resign or be terminated. We have a few more contracts coming before us this evening, correct?
You do, yes.
Is residency included in those contracts as well?
Yeah, I've negotiated that into the public health nurses and the building inspectors. I negotiated that into both those contracts.
So if any person is in violation of the residency requirement in those particular contracts, what will happen? Same thing you just...
What I said, yep.
You just explained to us. So let's say 7 members of the building department whose contract is coming before us this evening. What if they just said, you know what, we're not going to live in the city? And in fact, not only are we not going to live in the city, we dare you to enforce it. What would occur to those individuals?
What I described before.
Okay, so they would be either given the opportunity to resign or be terminated.
Yep.
So what makes those individuals any different from the district chiefs?
Yep, as I explained, that's language that has been recently negotiated into those contracts and that we've been enforcing throughout the period of time that it's been in the contracts. With the district chiefs, that language goes back at least 30 years and wasn't enforced. So they're created a practice during that period of time, and that's what I'm concerned about.
So for 30 years, we haven't enforced what's on the books.
Right.
How long have you been the director of HR?
8 years.
8 years.
Yep.
And so you knew that they were in violation of the contract probably fairly quickly. Are you able to fire these individuals or ask them to resign, or is that, whose responsibility is that?
It's the commissioners. I'm not the appointing authority.
Okay, so you don't have the authority?
No.
Okay, so it's the commissioners, the mayor?
No.
Just the commissioner? Okay. So we've essentially allowed these district chiefs to run a red light every year. And we've asked whoever their department head was to hold them accountable. And for the last 30 years, the department head has not held them accountable. and the city has known that these individuals have been in violation, and the city has not forced their department head to fire them or force them to resign, what would ordinarily happen under any other circumstances, according to you, Mr. Mahoney. And so essentially the city also has been complicit in this. And so long as the city council cooperated, there was nothing for these district chiefs to worry about. And so with that said, I can't in good conscience allow this to pass today. And, you know, among the other reasons that we've stated throughout this process that just doesn't make sense for us to approve this contract, whether it's the $1 million+ that's being taken outside of the city, or whether it's the other individuals who have abided by the residency ordinance and ultimately will be hurt by grandfathering these individuals in. The most compelling argument for us not to vote on this contract today is the fact that this contract is before, a ruling is before the court. And we're waiting on Judge Sweeney to decide whether this ordinance is enforceable, or whether the city, or whether she's going to force the city to enforce this ordinance, among other things. And when I looked at the transcript today, it said the plaintiff seeks by motion declaratory judgment on the pleadings in the matter brought forth, and the 10 taxpayers, finding that the Springfield's residency ordinance as such is a valid exercise of the Springfield's legislative authority under the home enrollment, and that it's binding and operative with regard to the Chiefs Union. And so they're waiting on Judge Sweeney to rule on this. And yet, the city is willing, knowing that, to bring this before this body and ask us to pass this particular legislation. I don't understand. I don't understand what gives.
Council,
Let me finish, because I'm almost ready to wrap up.
Okay.
Give me one more second. And if you read the transcript, which I'll send to counselors, there's some strong language that the judge has around the implications of of voting in favor of what we have before us today. And so to me, it seems as though it would be negligent on our part as a body to vote on this contract. So I certainly won't be voting in favor of it. I know that was no surprise. But at the very least, it seems to me that we should send this to committee to give the rest of my colleagues an opportunity to at least review this. And I think you will, after you review it, arrive at the same conclusion that I've arrived at today. And so I will make a motion at the proper time to send this to committee. And otherwise, if it doesn't go to committee, I certainly won't be supporting it.
Would you like to make the motion at this time, Councilor Hurst?
Sure.
Motion made by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Gomez, to send this matter to the General Government Subcommittee chaired Councilor Ash on the motion.
No? Is he not here? Huh?
Attorney Pakula here?
My question to Attorney Pakula, if he is still in the building, could he speak to that, just that specific portion, explain maybe a little bit to the council what those ramifications might be, and in his opinion, to give us a little bit of clarity on that. While we're waiting, Mr. President, if I may, I wanted to comment a little bit, and I certainly hear loud and clear and Councilor Hurst's frustration, and I respect his opinion. He knows that I do. For whatever reason, some 30 years ago in 1988 or whenever it was, somebody decided that we weren't going to be paying close attention to this specific part of the contract, and that's well before any of our time here on the council. And so, as I see it, doesn't mean that it's right, but as I see it, it's not something that we created, but what we can do and what it's our responsibility to do is to fix it going forward. And I think that's what this contract does. It says, okay, something was wrong, it's wrong. We don't have the ability to go back in time and make somebody pay attention in 1988 or 1998 or 2008, but in 2018 we can fix it. We can make it right. That doesn't mean we hold these guys culpable to that. They were operating under a certain set of rules, and they went by those rules, right or wrong, and probably more wrong than right. But however, they've been working on the same contract since 2011, and that's not fair either. So, Eddie, I don't know if you're still here. My question to you is, Councilor Hurst brought up a legal ruling and that he has in his possession that Judge Sweeney is going to rule on this matter. And what does it mean to us in this council to take action on this matter tonight, if we did?
I think it can only be helpful. I think that the longer you delay, the more you kick the can down the road, and the more uncertainty there is in anybody who's thinking about coming to work for the city. You know, Judge Sweeney has had that in her chambers, and we're waiting for a decision. It's been fully briefed and argued. I don't know when it's going to be decided. But this type of decision can only help the city's side.
Okay, so I guess that's the interpretation. That's the counselor has his and the attorney has his. So again, for my position would be, a message to the court would be, we understand that we've been derelict in it, but we're taking appropriate actions to correct that. And I think by ratifying this contract tonight sends that message, and that finally puts this matter, I think, hopefully to rest and start fresh with a new commissioner as we have now, and kind of build that department back up. I think it's been there's been some issues around this contract, and I think this council needs to take some action.
Just quick.
Councilor Hurst.
If you read the transcript, she speaks, and she has some strong language in terms of what the ramifications would be of us approving this particular contract. And I would just recommend that you guys take a look, at the very least, at the transcript prior to voting on anything. It just makes sense to me. I mean, it will enlighten you as to both sides, as opposed to just the city side. And I think it's important. We also have an obligation to our citizens as well. And I just caution us making a decision without reading the transcript.
What transcript? I'm not sure. What's the transcript of what?
The transcript of the last time that you went to court before the judge when you argued.
I don't have a copy of that. I was there. I argued it, but I don't have a copy of it. But is there some particular section that you want to bring to my attention, or that I can try to enlighten you, or?
I think the councilors should be. You know, there are not a whole lot of legalese. I think everybody's more than capable of understanding it, and it actually is pretty straightforward. And I think it would be useful information, especially for my attorneys in the room, to read that prior to making any decision this evening. And I think we'd be negligent if we didn't.
Councilor Shay.
Yeah, I don't know just who to ask the question of, but have we not had contracts in the past with other units in which this type of issue has come up, and we have done what we've done here, in which we've tried to correct it in the current contract going forward? So are there other units in which we approve new contracts that have the same basic fact pattern as this, in which there were individuals who had not moved into the city, and then the new contract required new hires to go forward?
Yeah, we've my recollection is, I think my number's at 11 contracts that I've negotiated for new hires are subject to the residency ordinance, and we've grandfathered the other ones.
And to make that like this contract, I take it there were individuals in those units who had not moved into the city, but that new contract left them where they were, and going forward, the new hires had to move in.
Yeah, that's what we've done with just about all.
So that's a pattern. Not only do we have a pattern here of the city and the employee, both acquiescence over 30 years of compliance and allowing this situation to exist, we've also settled other contracts with the same fact pattern as this. And now, why would we not approve this contract when it matches the others that we've approved in the past? And the other item that we have to look at, if we're going to look at fairness, is there's individuals in this contract who have complied with the ordinance and who haven't had a raise in 8 years. So it doesn't seem fair that we would hold people hostage on raises for 8 years because we're trying to solve a problem with one individual, when in fact the city has approved other contracts like we're being asked to approve here. So why would we single out this group?
Councilor Edwards.
I hear the word fair being used a lot. But the reality is anytime somebody starts to invoke the word fear in a conversation like this, there's the other side of the coin, which is the people who were prohibited from being able to apply for these jobs who were residents. And one of the additions that my colleague talked about was the fact that the contract, the question around this contract was is those weren't legally mandated, and they weren't in violation because the real issue or crux of this is not whether it was legal or not, it was illegal, but their city by choice chose not to enforce it. That's what's before the court. There's no question about whether it was legal or not for them or be mandated to bring residents of the city. That part is they were in violation. The only part they're arguing in court is because the city failed to enforce it, we shouldn't enforce it now. And then so when we talk about the fairness, let's think about the fairness of the 30 years that people who were qualified, who were residents, who did live in the city, or even the 3 individuals who do live in the city that are, yes, entitled to the raise, but it's the 7 who are not. And let me just finally say, there is another remedy. We just saw that happen with our former fire commissioner. There is a remedy, and they choose not to move in the city because any of these 7 individuals have the right to rent an apartment, rent a room, get an electric bill, and show residency. They don't have to take the raise no more than they have to move back in the city. And they don't have to stay in these deputy positions. We have people on the fire department right now that can fill any of those 7 slots that if they choose to quit, retire, or not to just chose not to agree to do this. There is a remedy that's in their they have the remedy and they have a choice. I know it's not fair for them to have to sell their house if they live in Agawam and they live and want to work in Springfield. Fine, I don't want to make them do that. But I want them to live in the city because that's what the law said, and that's what the real crux of it is during the time, whether it was 1 year, 3 year. And you know what's also disheartening? We've been talking about this contract for at least a year, almost 2 years. And the individual who was supposed to, since we started this conversation, the city still hasn't even forced him to move in. And if we got the head of personnel standing here and he don't know whether the guy is here, as controversial and as divisive as this issue is, and the head of personnel is telling me he don't even know, and he knows how divided we are, how this department, we've argued this case. These guys are here, been sitting here, and it's not fair for them to be sitting here, but that's disappointing, and that's disheartening, and that doesn't even reflect a lot of confidence in the head of personnel that he does come standing here for an issue this controversial and can't talk about the one individual we know that was mandated by law to be in the city since we started the conversation about these raises. So I will support this going to committee to allow my colleagues the opportunity to read the legal document that is being presented before them, or I'll vote against it. Because these are 7 officers, they have a remedy that they can choose. It doesn't have to include the raise.
There's a motion on the floor to send the matter to committee. Councilor Gomez on the motion.
I just have 2 questions. Mr. Mahoney, you said that you've been with the city for 8 years. Going forward, out of the 10 district chiefs, have any of them been a district chief for over 8 years?
Yeah.
What's the longest district chief standing now of today? How many years have they been a district chief before you came into working for the city?
I don't know. I don't know.
But is there any district chiefs here by show of hands?
Yep.
Can you just raise your hands? So majority of you here? How many have been here for 10 years? As a district chief, 10 years. 9 years? 8 years? So you guys were, these 3 gentlemen that have their hands raised, they were here before you were employed by the city of Springfield. Well, probably you were employed, but in this position.
Sorry?
In this position that you are now in, you've only been in 8 years.
Right.
So these 3 gentlemen, out of 7 people have been hired under your tenure.
Right.
And going forward, knowingly that you stated on record that it's been 30 years that we haven't been complying with this ordinance, within those 8 years, you had a chance with those 7 years to make sure those 7 people complied.
It's the same issue, Counselor.
Not necessarily, because you are responsible.
Because it's been going on for 20 years before I got here.
And how many commissioners?
It doesn't matter. It's the same issue.
I'm not trying to attack you. I'm just
enforced its rule.
What I'm asking is this: how many commissioners, after you've been employed, those 8 years, have come and became after you? How many commissioners have you've worked with from the 8 years that you started in your position till now?
There's 3 commissioners.
3 commissioners, and you said that the power of the commissioner because you don't have the power to fire, but you have the power to enforce residency, and that's all I'm trying to make clear. And in those 8 years, with those 7 new individuals, I don't know which ones are the ones that aren't in compliance or not, but in that ratio, you still had that chance to make it right of those 30 years. That's all I'm trying to make clear. I'm not attacking you. I think you've done a phenomenal job with the rest of our unions and the rest of our contracts. But in those 7 years, knowingly, I've been on the council, this is my 2nd term. This is my 2nd term, and we've been arguing this for 3 years. My uncle had to retire out of that union because of the struggles and you guys getting rid of positions, putting positions back in, and then what happens is when somebody doesn't comply, he gets demoted, and then a position that doesn't get filled, all of a sudden gets filled by our old commissioner, and then from there they get demoted, somebody gets promoted. There's a lot of underlying things other than this contract that I am not comfortable with. And all I'm stating is, and I understand the frustrations that of 30 years, we haven't complied for it, and I understand about the raises. People deserve the money that they work for. And if as counselors, as ward counselors, we're mandated, we can't even serve on this body. I can't serve on this body. I wouldn't be able to be elected if I didn't come from Ward 1 and were elected by Ward 1 residents. If it was an at-large counselor, which we brought back in ward representation, half of these counselors wouldn't be on this body. So what I'm trying to simply state is, if we have to follow a law, and if I have to live in Ward 1, then the fact of the matter is that's all we're trying to get at the point. We're not saying that these are bad firefighters, you guys are horrible. You guys risk your lives every single day. But there's individuals that lived and came up through the ranks just like you guys did. And it's not your fault that 30 years ago, somebody before him didn't have you guys comply. But essentially, when he was hired, and when you signed that contract, it was in the contract, regardless if it was you were in compliance or not. And moving forward, of course, we want to get it right. But if we don't get it right this time, regardless, we're still going to be held accountable. And if we don't hold ourselves accountable, how are we going to hold anything else that we do in the near future accountable? And end the story. I apologize if you feel that I personally tried to attack you, but I was just trying to make the point that since you were hired, at 8 years, people have been promoted to district chief, which is fabulous, but at that moment in time, that was your chance to get it right. Thank you.
Councilor Walsh on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, I do see this as a fairness issue. I think there's a couple of things here that have been said tonight that are important to pay attention to, but there have been bad practices. I mean, let's not forget waivers. Let's not forget the atmosphere that this discussion is going in, and it bothers me that it's beginning to be so personal and dividing the council. I mean, the last time we voted on this, I think there was support to move it forward, but there's a technicality that I hope will not happen tonight. But it seems to me, well, let me just ask this one question. Have these gentlemen been doing their jobs? Have they been fulfilling their jobs and what they're supposed to be doing for the citizens of Springfield?
Well, certainly.
So they've been doing their job. I think it was Councilor Shea. They deserve to be rewarded for the jobs that they have done protecting the citizens of Springfield. We are not doing that, and I think we need to. Waivers, exceptions, unfairness, this is definitely a fairness issue, and I don't like it because it seems to me that we are taking all the sins of the past and putting it on the backs of these gentlemen in our audience and blaming them for everybody that got an exemption or a waiver or who shouldn't have moved in, and I don't think we should do that. I think we should come together, take advantage of the new language, and move it forward. Because of this discussion, we have better languages in some of our contracts, would you say?
We do.
So some good has come out of the bad of this. We need to move it forward and end it. Certainly isn't fair to these people's families who thought that they were getting certain financial rewards. Maybe they have tuitions and houses and things like that, and we're holding it up. It's just gotten too personal, and it really, really bothers me, and I would like to see it settled tonight, settled in favor of these people who have served the city. And I remember all the discussions in the state. Don't forget there are exemptions in the state for teachers. You got to take all that in consideration and not blame these guys.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, this is a pretty divisive issue, right? And one thing I want to start off by saying is that I'm really happy that the council is this passionate about this subject and getting it right. We may have a difference of opinion as to what that means in this particular instance, but we all believe really strongly in residency. It's been something that we've actively worked on for over 8 years now. I'm speaking for myself, and as the former chair of the Special Committee on Residency, I'm really proud of the innovations and the changes that we've made. Creating a transparent waiver process, one that works, one that we're following. Earlier tonight, I signed my residency compliance statement. 8 years ago, those didn't exist. And it was only through the efforts of Attorney Mahoney and others that we were able to achieve those results. So I'm proud of those achievements, and I'm proud of the fact that we've had collective bargaining agreements ratified that have this language in it to protect us as a city for compliance moving forward on our intention to enforce the residency ordinance. Mr. Mahoney's job is not an easy one, and I think that it, in some respects, may be a badge of honor that we've given him a few more gray hairs than he anticipated having at this point in time in his life after being here for just 8 years. The process that we've inherited and the issue that we've inherited is flawed. It's messy. There have been predecessors to ourselves, Judge Boyle and many others, who have championed this issue going back decades and decades, and the hodgepodge of agreements and results and exceptions to the law and waivers for department heads and deputy department heads, I believe that based on the consistent position and progress that this body has made in the last 8 years, those days are almost behind us. And we see it in the form of the other 2 collective bargaining agreements that are going to be before us tonight. We've already ratified versions of those agreements that have strong residency language in it. So we're left with a tough choice. I don't like what's happened. I don't like the current status of our agreement and the way that it's been treated. I don't like some of the accusations that have been made in the courts regarding the handling of some of these decisions. Each of those things makes me cringe. But we have to be decisive. We have to make a choice. How do we move forward? How do we improve the situation? And we can't correct the errors of the past. So we have a solution, one that myself and others have spent a great deal of time working on, to see an agreement before us that would result in all future members of this bargaining unit being lifetime city residents until they retire, then move to Florida. I don't care. But this agreement achieves that. And it does so in a pretty remarkable fashion. We have discussed this particular contract and these particular individuals at least 4 full city council meetings. We've had committee sessions on it. We've had procedural rules invoked in delaying the process. We've had international burials getting involved and traveling schedules that have impeded us along the way. And I don't begrudge anybody for voting no on the subject, because I understand that it's messy and there's no universal solution. But our duty and our oath of office is to find a solution here. And inaction without a proper path forward for a better choice isn't really living up to that duty. So I support this agreement because I think it's a good path forward. And I want to speak briefly in closing about the motion to committee made by Councilor Hurst. I am inclined to oppose that because of the history that I just outlined, but Councilor Hurst introduced a compelling fact that I'd like to know a little bit more about. And he said that there's a transcript that exists, which I presume that you have or have reviewed. I don't possess it. And what I took from his statements is that there are comments made by the judge in that transcript which would be germane to our discussions here tonight, basically directed at this body. And I think he also characterized them as pretty straightforward. So, I'd like to know, first of all, if the counselor has seen those comments or possesses them, and secondly, if we can just cut to the chase and you tell us what it says tonight so we can know whether or not it's something to be concerned about. If he presents something that's compelling and I'm concerned, then I'll support the motion to committee. But if there's nothing to present, then this has gone on long enough, and I'm ready to act tonight.
Councilor Twiggs.
Mr. President, thank you. I've listened to some compelling arguments here tonight. It seemed to me that I've heard these arguments before. Councilor Fenton is right that this has been before us on several occasions, and we've had full council discussions on it. And you would recall several meetings ago, I said, let's get this off of our desk by voting for it. And of course, the question came up with someone from the department writing some crazy information in Facebook and what have you, and the mayor took it off of our agenda, and subsequently, there are some social issues that are involved in this contract. The real issue that I have, and I think it was argued pretty good by Councilman Gomez, that how can the city leader of enforcing regulations who don't live in the city and don't have a clue about what's happening with people who he don't have to look at. This regulation has been on the books since I've been here, 8 years, about people living in the city. And so if we have elevated district chiefs within 8 years, then we're breaking the law. Or at least people are not listening to our council ordinance. And then I have the other feeling that if 3 people abide by the rules, let's pay them. So I would place a motion on the floor that the 3 district chiefs that lives within the city, let's give them the raise. And until committee works out a question about how we're going to deal with the others, let's send it to committee. I hope someone will second that. I guess nobody will.
Councilor Ryan.
Just in response to what my colleague, Councilor Hirsch, said, when were the parties last in front of Judge Sweeney?
Forget the date.
But approximately how long?
Months.
Months? Well, today is February 5th, so we talking November, we talking before November?
My recollection, it was right around election time in November.
Okay.
If Attorney, he has the transcript, maybe you could read the date. Evan, do you remember?
But with respect to that, was there any discussion when you were last in front of the court about the city not being empowered, legally empowered to take action on these contracts? Was there any discussion with the court?
I don't recall that. The arguments that were being made as I recall them, were sort of esoteric. You know, I'm really surprised the judge hasn't issued a ruling. The plaintiffs group are asking for an order that the judge has said she's not going to give. They've already ruled on it. That's our position.
And the order that they're asking the judge to give would be what?
Well, they're framing it as, quote, enforce the ordinance, but they want to fire everybody who doesn't live in the city. And the judge has said in her decisions not to amend the complaint. No, I'm not going to do that. In the request for mandamus, she said, no, I'm not going to do that. The only thing I'm expecting is a decision that says, this is a valid ordinance, because it is. And that's not the issue that you guys are all debating. You guys are all debating, well, what's the effect of that ordinance on these individuals?
We're debating a labor relations issue.
Yeah, and well, right now you have before you a contract, and you can't, we're prohibited by law from dealing with individual members of a union. We can only deal with the collective bargaining agent, and that is the union.
Okay.
And that's who's named in the agreement, and that's what's here before you. So we can't say, well, we like this member of the union, but not the other one.
How long has this lawsuit been in existence? Approximately.
No, I think it was filed a year prior to the argument. I think November of 16.
So it's been around 15 months plus or minus.
At least.
And at any time has the plaintiffs requested the judge to stop the city, the mayor, the council from taking action with respect to the contract that's before us?
Yeah, I think they initiated an injunction request.
And the court's order on that was what?
Well, there was no injunction issue.
Okay, so the court denied it.
The issue that we have is they're requesting an injunction now, and that they've asked for a judgment on the pleadings. There hasn't been any trial.
Okay.
They just want, look, on all of the stuff that we filed, we're entitled to a judgment. And I think they are entitled to a judgment that says this is a valid ordinance. But that's not the issue, and that's not going to solve anything. Okay. The issue is, well, what's the impact on these people? And the point is that varies from person to person.
Thank you.
So I believe the date was November. Is that correct? Yes.
That's my recollection. It was right around election time.
All right. Councilor Letterman.
November 14th.
Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to begin my statements by thanking the district chiefs for their service to the city of Springfield and for what you do every day to keep our fire department running, to keep the residents of the city of Springfield safe. I think, and I hope I can speak for all of my colleagues when I say that the matter we're debating today is not one of a personal nature. I don't have a particular issue with any member of this union. I've met with the union. The representatives I had the pleasure of meeting with seemed to be honorable gentlemen, and I enjoyed and appreciated our conversation and them reaching out to me. With that being said, I do have policy concerns and precedent-setting concerns about the fact that the majority of members of this bargaining agreement seem to be in violation of an ordinance that I think has very far-reaching effects in the city of Springfield. And so with that being said, I have a few questions I'd like to ask, and I would ask that councilors bear with me. I know this has been before the body on many occasions, but this is the first time that it's been before the body with me as a sitting member. So if Mr. Mahoney could come back up to the podium. Thank you. So Mr. Mahoney, in previous contracts that have had language like this, how large have those bargaining units been? How many individuals, workers are in them?
I'm not exactly certain. I mean, I have like a UFCW contract that had language in it, and they had various times between 100 and 200 members. And
what would you say was the level that those employees were in? Were they management level? Were they?
No, rank and file.
Okay. And what would you say was the average rate of pay of members in those bargaining units?
Current is, 40, 45 in there.
And in those, could you repeat that one more time?
40 to 45.
$40,000 to $45,000 annually.
Yeah.
And would you say now in those contract negotiations that were subsequently approved, you had large numbers of individuals who were in violation of an ordinance?
Can you repeat that?
So in the agreements with past unions that we've bargained, you had members of those bodies that were in violation of the residency ordinance.
I don't know. There might have been, sure. Back before my time, yeah.
Well, I'm talking about the ones that we've bargained under your time that you've, held up tonight as a reason to move this forward.
The ones that I've bargained under that was before my time. But if we find someone that's in violation, we talk to them about it. We bring them in. We have that conversation, and we tell them they're going to resign or they're going to get terminated.
I think you're misunderstanding my question. So my question is, in units that you have bargained with in the past and put this same type of language into the agreement.
Yes.
So those unions had members who were in violation of the ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you know if any of those members in those collective bargaining units in the past had been granted waivers or some other official language that told them they didn't have to abide by the ordinance?
I'm sure that, yes, we've had waivers in certain circumstances.
Okay. So my next set of questions relate to the district chief. So could you say, for the record, and also for my knowledge, in the structure of the fire department, what level is a district chief? So it goes the commissioner, then
deputy, then district, then captain, then lieutenant, then private.
Okay. And are all the district chiefs paid the same rate?
More or less.
What would their average annual rate of pay be?
It's around high 90s to 100,000 in there.
And to your knowledge, have any of the individuals who are out of compliance with the ordinance been granted a waiver or in some other capacity been told they didn't have to comply with the ordinance?
I can't answer that question.
So my next question is I think a labor relations one. In the event that 7 district chiefs resigned their position, what would happen?
You would lose the command structure of the fire department, a good portion of it.
So what would the process be to fill those positions?
You go to a civil service list.
So I think that the thing that I'm struggling with here, and I'll be honest that this is a tough vote, I think it's a tough vote for all of the counselors. The thing that I struggle with here is that we're dealing with a higher level of management. We're dealing with people that are going to be looked upon by the citizens of the city of Springfield as leading in the city of Springfield and leading an extremely important part of our city's public safety mechanisms. I'm struggling to find a way to justify voting in favor of allowing people to continue to violate this ordinance to my constituents. I'm trying to find a way to justify telling them that we're going to continue to allow individuals to take what is essentially 4 to 5 times the average salary of someone in the city of Springfield out of the city of Springfield. And I'm trying to understand how to explain that to them. I think that, we've heard a lot about fairness tonight, and we've heard a lot about that things weren't enforced and shouldn't have been enforced, and because they weren't enforced now, people don't have to abide by them. But we have a lot of attorneys in the room, and I just feel like if you're caught breaking the rules after breaking them for a long time does not mean that you're not breaking the rules. And while I understand the need to move the contract forward, and I am really, I'm really torn because, tied to this is also, I think, ensuring that these gentlemen are compensated fairly for the job that they were doing, and ensuring that the 3 who are in compliance are compensated. But I'm not seeing really any movement on this issue, and I guess at some point, I wonder, what is the issue with complying with the residency ordinance? It's on the books, it was known about, there was nothing granted to say that they shouldn't comply with it, and so I am inclined to support Councilor Hurst's motion to send this to committee, and if it does not go to committee, I am inclined to vote no on it.
Mr. President, on the floor to send the matter to committee made by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Gomez. Councilor Shea on the motion.
Yeah, on the motion and the points made by Councilor Lederman, there have been, as you pointed out, contracts that we settled that are in line with this, in which we had individuals in the same fact pattern, and we settled for those units. But you can't apply a line of logic that, well, the people that you had those contracts with made less money, or those units had fewer people. We have to have a policy and a consistency if we're going to go forward in which everyone is treated the same. And so we can't apply one standard to this contract and another standard to another contract.
Mr. President, if I can just point out something to the council that might be helpful. What's unique about the fire department and the police department is that the only way you get into this rank is to be promoted up. That's how you get into the district chief rank. And for the rest of your career as a firefighter or as a lieutenant or as a captain, for all these gentlemen, there was no residency ordinance. And that's different than, say, the UPSI group or the UFCW group or one of those other groups that we've negotiated with and said, okay, you don't have to come up through this chain of command where you're not covered by it. In fact, you're covered under this statute that you're operating under, where you can live within 10 miles of the border of the city. But then you become the district chief. That's the distinction. And I think that's probably what was playing into the logic 30 years ago.
We have a motion on the floor to send the matter to committee. If there's anyone else who would like to comment on the motion, I will accept that now. Otherwise, Councilor Allen on the motion.
Thanks, Mr. President. Just a couple things to say. One is, this was a tough issue to bring back. The culture, when many of us got on the council in 2010, after the ward councilor election in 2009, this issue was nowhere. It was absolutely nowhere. And through the efforts of Councilor Fenton and others, we worked hard to bring this issue back. And now we have what right in front of us here tonight, 11 people, or 12 of us here tonight, all of whom are in favor of residency. And if we have the power to work together on this, we can change that culture. We've already changed it. The only thing in our way is, can we just put our hats down for a second and vote for this thing tonight so we can move on and use that power that we've created? We're all in favor. We're splitting. Where are the people against residency? I don't see them. They're not here. Everybody here is in favor of residency. It's just a judgment call whether you believe it's time to govern and to move on. And unfortunately, this issue is not going to get any cleaner the longer we wait for it. When I went to a funeral in Ireland of one of my best friends in life and made this issue unvotable in June, it went 6-6 because I was at a funeral. And that was June 19th. It's now February. The thing hasn't gotten any cleaner, any more easy. We're all in favor of residency. Let's put this thing to bed, let's vote for this, and then let's put our power into continuing to change the culture of the city and the city council and City Hall on this issue. Because we have finally stood up as a body and said, this matters. So let's vote for it tonight and put our power together. Thank you.
Motion made by Councilor Hurst, seconded by Councilor Gomez to send the matter to the General Government Subcommittee, chaired by Councilor Edwards. All in favor of sending the matter to committee, say aye. Aye. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On sending the item to committee, a yes vote sends the item to committee, a no vote keeps this item before the body. Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Shea.
No.
No. Councilor Gomez. Yes. Councilor Walsh. No. Councilor Fenton.
No.
No. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash.
No.
No. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan.
No.
No. Councilor Allen.
No.
No. Councilor Ramos.
Yes.
The item stays before the body.
Not sufficient, motion fails.
The motion failed. The motion of the committee failed.
Is there any further discussion? Councilor Twiggs.
Years of being involved in community affairs, I don't know, it's quite frequently the real deal on situations. I don't want to see us come down to a black or vote on this on any. And that is essentially what is happening here. Now, it is not in the best interest of the city that we go black and white. And I know members are holding their heart. On whatever occasion, I supported this issue, to give it our past. But I thought the Human Resource Committee would negotiate a better contract. It's not a lousy contract. It comes in 2018. But nevertheless, that's what it is. Nobody wants to support the split the union. I don't agree. But the fact of the matter is this issue has become a black and white issue. And I don't like it.
Is there any further discussion on the matter before we take a vote? Seeing none. Under our rules and orders, this is subject to Rule 19. All in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Aye. Opposed? There's an objection to Rule 19. We will take up the matter in two separate votes. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On the first step of ratifying the contract, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs.
On the first step of what?
This is first step to ratifying the contract. If you vote yes,
Yes.
the contract, first step on ratification passes. If
Yes.
you vote no, it does not. Yes on ratifying the contract. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
No.
No. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
No.
No. Councilor Edwards.
No.
No. Councilor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Hurst.
No.
No. Councilor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ramos.
No. More than sufficient. First step passes. We will take up the second vote at our next regular meeting.
Item 19 is the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement for the Springfield Public Nurses.
I promise this one will be much shorter. We've had 3 bargaining sessions. We started on April 11th, 2017. We had 2 mediation sessions. There are 4 employees in the bargaining unit. However, we're now down to 2 employees in this bargaining unit. It is a series of 2 contracts. The first contract is for 1 year, covering the period of 7/1/16 to June 30th, 2017. The second contract is a 3-year contract covering 7/1/17 to 6/30/20. The wages, 4 years, 2, 2, 2, and 2. There's a one-time signing bonus of $300. New employees will have evaluations. There is we've changed the sick leave buyback. Previously, employees could get full pay for their days over, the first 20 days were accepted, so any days over 20, they would get full pay up to a maximum of $1,500. We've dropped that. We've just put them back in what we've done with everybody else, and that's $30 a day, and that's the package.
Councilor Fenton.
I've got some questions for Mr. Mahoney. So, Attorney Mahoney, regarding residency as it pertains to this collective bargaining unit, the last collective bargaining agreement that we ratified included a residency provision, is that right? And in that agreement, did we agree to grandfather all existing employees as we've done with all other collective bargaining agreements? Are there any members of this union that have been approved for waivers, particularly in the last 12 months? Are there any members of this union that you're aware of who don't live inside the city? Can you say that each of them has submitted their annual response to the city compliance for residency purposes?
I couldn't say for sure. We just sent them out again, so I would expect that we have them back. But we're down to 2 employees. They would have both been grandfathered because they were hired prior to 2012 when we put the language in. Mm-hmm. I'm not certain of where they live.
So, Mr. President, similar to the last provision for collective bargaining ratification, where we had extensive discussions, this contract is a successor to contracts that grandfathered in existing employers. We have the Director of Human Resources and Labor Relations before us here tonight saying that he doesn't have direct personal knowledge of where all the members of the union live. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that he would. And with respect to this agreement, I believe that it's good policy, as it was when we passed the last one several years ago.
Councilor Hurst.
Was there a residency provision in this prior?
2012, we negotiated that in for the 2012 contract.
So previously you negotiated residency in which you grandfathered them in.
Yep. Yes.
Are you grandfathering anybody in this particular contract?
They're already grandfathered.
They're already grandfathered.
Yeah.
So So I guess I'm a little confused. The residency in the fire chief's contract, there was already language in there that required people to live in the city.
Right.
And those individuals didn't move into the city. Right? So we only grandfather them when we start off negotiations, right? And we want to get residency language into the contract. That's when we grandfather them. Isn't that accurate?
We grandfathered this group back in 2012.
You grandfathered, did they have residency language in their contract prior to 2012?
Yep.
Did they have residency language in their contract prior to 2012?
I don't believe they did.
They did not, which is ultimately why you grandfathered them in, which makes this case drastically different than the fire chief's case.
Any other questions or comments?
Go on all night.
How many nurses are we talking about, please?
2.
That's what I thought.
All right, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
On ratifying the contract, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton. Yes, Counselor Letterman. Yes, Counselor Edwards.
They said two.
Yes, Counselor Ash.
Contract.
Yes, Counselor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Ryan.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Allen.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Contract is approved.
Item number 20 is the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement with the National Association of Government Employees.
We had approximately 9 bargaining sessions. We began our negotiations on July 17th, 2017. There's approximately 12 employees in the bargaining unit. The wages are 2, 2, 2, and 2. The contract 1 is for 7/1/17 to 6/30/18. The second contract is 7/1/18 to 6/30/21. Effective 7/1/18, we're increasing the differential from moving to 40 hours. Previously, in the previous contract, they worked 37 and a half hours. We were moving, because we had the casino and a few other projects, we were moving them to a 40-hour work week. We gave them a 6% increase for that. Someone did the math, and they said, well, we really should be getting 6.7%. We said, we'll give you 6.7% effective 7/1/18. We got GPS in this contract. We want to have that because these folks are working in the field. We're giving everybody one department jacket next year. And the wage scale, we dropped one step between the first and the second step, one step between the second and third step for each year of 2 years.
Any questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the contract, Counselor Williams, absent. Counselor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Shay.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Ash. Yes, Counselor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Ryan. Absent, Counselor Allen.
Yes.
Yes, Counselor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. Collective bargaining agreement is approved.
Item number 21 is an order to transfer $100,000 from free cash to the Department of Economic Development.
Good evening, Edward Pakula, City Solicitor. This is an item that is covered in the host community agreement under Section 4.10. It is a concept that in some respects is even more important than the host community agreement itself. Because, okay, we've landed MGM, and we get all the benefits of that, but how do we spread it? How do we get the ripple effect? How do we get concentric circles around that site to be attractive for development? And so we thought of that when we did the host community agreement, and we came up with this idea to cooperate in coming up with a blueprint. We call it the Blue Zone. And it doesn't deal with the actual casino site, but what regulations from a land use perspective do we want to put in effect around the casino to make sure that we get the biggest bang for the buck. And so this is the first step. We're moving forward with this, and MGM is going to be contributing. We may seek other sources, but this is the first step. And if we get it going, it's only going to make the area around the casino more attractive. So we're asking that you approve this so we can get it going.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
To the president, so sorry. Little humor tonight, use a little humor.
Absolutely. Gotta have fun. Gotta have fun. Patience.
Patience,
Talk
humor.
to people who disagree and have fun. Those are my 3 rules.
That's good. That's what we're going to be like. We disagree, we're going to have fun. So is this our 100,000, is that matched by MGM money or something?
Yeah.
How's that work?
Yes, that's the plan. But if it might go more than that, we might seek some other funds. I don't, it's just getting started.
And who's going to administer it?
Echo Dev, but really what we're doing, it's a kind of a continuation. Under the host community agreement, we had lawyers that represented us, and they had experts to help guide us. And so we're using those same experts from the Chicago studio who have been guiding this body throughout all the stages with their analysis. And this is just the next step, getting them to move beyond that site and to show us how to get the ripples in the pond.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the transfer, Counselor Williams, absent. Counselor Twiggs? Yes. Counselor Shea? Yes. Counselor Gomez?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Walsh?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ash?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Hurst?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ramos?
Yes, more than sufficient. Transfer is approved.
Item 22 is an order to Item 22 is an order to transfer $80,000 from free cash to economic development.
Thank you, Mr. President, to the council. Last fall, I was before the council doing a new contract or new MOU with the bid, and I stated that we're going to increase the appropriation to the bid from $70,000 to $150,000. We budgeted at $70,000 in FY18, excuse me, but we chose to increase it due to all the economic development activity downtown and wanted to keep our downtown beautiful. So this is coming for the second part of that, is asking for the appropriation to set the entire $150,000 in economic development's budget to pay the bid.
Councilor Ryan.
Just on this, TJ, could you tell us what we're hoping to get downtown for this $80,000 that's being spent or being asked?
Yeah, so the bid does a beautification and does a lot of maintenance for us downtown. They do some cleaning stuff and making sure that downtown's presentable, always looking nice. And so now, the way Pat Sullivan's always described it as we, want to look like Disneyland downtown all the time. So this is a way to kind of have our parks forces when we get ready for MGM, and then to have some augmented services from the bid to make sure that we're doing that.
But this is an expanded service as opposed to what they did last year.
Correct. This is making sure that we're getting more from them and making sure that we're getting more services down.
Would this kind of be used for spring planting, spring cleanup, and that kind of?
Yeah, different things, lighting, all the different things that they do.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Seeing none, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the transfer, Counselor Williams, absent. Counselor Twiggs? Yes. Counselor Shea?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Gomez?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Walsh?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ash? Yes. Counselor Hurst?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ryan? Yes. Counselor Allen?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ramos?
Yes, more than sufficient. Transfer is approved.
Item number 24 is a transfer of $644,000.80 from free cash to the OPEB trust fund.
Thank you, Mr. President, to the council. This, as we've done the last couple of years, the council set up an OPEB trust fund, and we're trying to get it funded to address a nearly $1 billion liability for health insurance for our retirees. It's a small drop in the bucket, but it sends the right message to Moody's and Standard & Poor's that we recognize we have the liability and we're working towards it. Really, it's kind of an informal policy of 10% of free cash is transferred into this trust, and we're sticking with that as kind of the way forward as we try to grapple with the issue.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor of suspension of Rule 19, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
On approving the transfer, Counselor Williams, absent. Counselor Twiggs? Yes. Counselor Shea?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Gomez?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Walsh?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Edwards?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ash? Yes. Counselor Hurst?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ryan?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Allen?
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ramos?
Yes, more than sufficient. Transfer is approved.
Item number 26 is first step on the TIF notification ordinance sponsored by Councilor Allen.
Thanks, Mr. President. I'll just cut to the chase. There's two paragraphs in this thing. The reason behind it is there have been too many TIFs brought before the City Council where we first found out about the TIF when it was before us. And the spirit of this ordinance, if it passes, is to include us earlier in the process. Not to negotiate, not to muck things up, but to know, so that we know something's going on and we can ask questions if it's appropriate. It's not to insert us into the negotiation process. It's simply to know. There have been too many TIFs that have come before us where that hasn't been the case. So if I could just read this to you. It's just the two paragraphs. Don't do. Well, let me just read this last line of Section A. City Council will be provided with a detailed project memo outlining project benefits and analysis of job creation and tax benefits. It's easy to approve TIFs because they are always for something that sounds good for the city, and this isn't saying it's not. It's just saying, could we get a little more notice on it earlier in the process? So upon receipt, we would receive a letter when the application goes to the state. City will provide a copy to the office of the council, which includes some basic information, etc. So I'm simply, putting this forward so that we can get in the loop a little earlier, and Councilor Gomez, who's Chair of Economic Development, or the Council President, Councilor Ramos, that somebody that we find out and can be more like partners as we go forward, so we're not voting on something that comes before us too quickly. Thank you.
Councilor Twiggs.
This is an excellent idea. Move the place. Second.
All right. We will take first step. First step is the voice vote, correct, Mr. Clerk? That's correct. Right. All in favor of first step for the TIF notification, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Item 27 is an ordinance amending Chapter 73 of the Charter of the Ordinances of the City of Springfield, sponsored by Councilor Fenton.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a proposal to fix an administrative component of our ordinances and provides for a certain amount of leave time for municipal employees if they're going to a child's educational event. This is a correction to expand that definition to apply to children of theirs who may have events in college. For example, a graduation, a move-in day, not just high school. It won't increase the compensation of any employee. It also will not result in any additional earned time or off time. It just allows them to apply the time that they're already entitled to college activities for their children if they choose to take it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of first step, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it.
Item 28 is an act providing for the term of office of the Springfield City Council.
Councilor Walsh.
This actually is a housekeeping issue. This is a item that's already been before the voters of the city of Springfield. They supported it 60-40, 66% for, 33 against, and it just needs to be refiled at the State House so that they can take some action on it. But the voters have already spoken on this issue, so we're not asking you tonight whether or not you're actually in favor of the 4-year term. We're asking you to follow the will of our constituents who want to see this happen. And it's late at night, but I mean, when we think about past elections and a 9% turnout, there's even more ammunition to make this something that should happen in the city of Springfield.
Councilor Twiggs.
President, the cost for elections is well over $100,000, and of course the number of turnout has been dismal. in many city precincts. Councilor Walsh and I have discussed this issue for a number of weeks, and we agree that simply what needs to be done is to forward this to the legislature. We probably need to get somebody in the Senate and somebody in the House who would lead the discussion for us, and I would suggest that that's what we do. But let's move forward on this.
Is there any further discussion? Councilor Ryan.
Mr. President, I'm going to be voting no on this. I probably voted no when it was on the ballot a couple years ago. As I read it, it looks like there's not much to it, but we're taking away an election. And I know there was 9% this last time, and that's dreadful, and I think we all wish it had been different. But I don't see how taking away a full election does anything to improve the turnout or advance the citizens' participation in the government. So I just don't, the city spends $600 and something million a year. It's like $637 million a year. $100,000 to have an election is an infinitesimally small portion of the city budget. And with all the things we spend, with all the money we spent tonight, I just don't see how we take away a full election cycle. And it's one of the things that if you're here, if you're serving, we should be happy to serve. We should be happy to get out there and do the work that you have to do. So I just think that this is the wrong way to improve voter turnout, the wrong way to lift voter turnout and voter participation. So I'm going to vote no, and if it goes down to the legislature, I will write the legislators locally and ask them not to vote for it, because it doesn't foster any of the things we all want to do, which is to get people more involved. And I understand why it's being presented, but I just ask that we reject it.
Letterman.
Good evening, Mr. President. Thank you. I too rise in opposition to this matter. And, I think I voted no on this on the ballot. I came out against it in both of my campaigns. And as I talked with voters across the city of Springfield, I didn't find great support for it. I don't think there's any evidence to show that it'll increase voter turnout. And I also don't believe that a 4-year term is an appropriate term for a legislative body such as ours. If I were to support a 4-year term, I would not actually support it being coterminous and elected at the same time as the mayor. I still think there should be an election every 2 years and provide that check and balance within our legislative system. To borrow a line from a former opponent, actually, and with all due respect to him, Alex Sherman, you don't increase voter turnout by canceling elections. And while I think the actions of my colleagues are with good intentions, I don't think that it's appropriate for this to have started here at this body, which is where it started when it was placed on the ballot in a non-binding manner in the first place. So I will also be voting no.
Councilor Twiggs.
I appreciate the position of the new council, but you're arguing something that is negative. This council has already passed it. The voters have already passed it. We're not asking you to vote on it. We're just telling you we're sending it back. This is a housekeeping position. You not vote. Hey, 66% of the voters have already said they're in favor of it. That tells us what to do. And so we've sent it down, and it was not taken up in the last session. So essentially what we're doing tonight is telling you, hey, we're going to send it back down. You don't have no vote on it.
Councilor Walsh.
Councilor Twiggs is right, because of some of the concerns that have been expressed, exactly why we put it on the ballot. I wish I had done it as a binding resolution, but we did it as a non-binding to get a sense of what our constituents want it. They want it, and I have already spoken to different members of the House and the Senate so that someone will pick it up and run with it. I mean, the problem before is that that did not happen, but it will happen this time, and we will be following the will of the voters.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call, Mr. Clerk.
To send it.
On passing the special act. No, on passing the special act. This is a new special act. This is on passing the special act.
I'm okay with it. Can you explain what's the special act?
The special act is the document that's before you in your packet. You're going to vote to pass it. That will send it to the mayor. If the mayor approves it, it will go on to the legislature.
Okay. Thank you.
Counselor Williams, absent. Counselor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Shay.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Gomez.
No.
No. Counselor Walsh.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Letterman.
No.
No. Counselor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ash.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ryan.
No.
No. Counselor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Counselor Ramos.
No. More than sufficient. A special act is approved.
The next item on tonight's agenda is the Echoes resolution.
Well, thank you.
Walsh.
I think this is something we can all agree on. I think it's a nice way to end the night, to have something, such a positive program in the city of Springfield to talk about. And we do happen to have here in the gallery the person who I think is the face of Echoes and responsible for the beautiful new Echoes building, and that is Bert Friedman, who has joined us, and I would like to ask him to come forward and speak. I recently became aware, when I joined a group called Friends of Echoes, that not all our sixth graders in the city of Springfield are able to take advantage of this program for various reasons. And there are pages of testimony from students going back through the years who talk about the Echoes experience, how great it was for them and what it did for them, hands-on, winter survival. I mean, this is a kind of a program that gives kids that maybe are not talented in other fields an opportunity to shine. I don't think they should be denied this opportunity, and I think it would be very helpful to have the support of the full council as Bert Friedman goes forward with this to the deciding bodies, the school committee, the empowerment board, so that they can see the support of the leaders in the city of Springfield. There was one individual who said that he learned how to make a lean-to at Echoes. Echoes was the best part of my education in the Springfield school system in the 1970s. It's one of the reasons that I became a biology professor. Now let's flash forward to 2018, when just about every kid has some kind of a handheld device or tablet. They don't speak to people, they don't have the social interaction. We're putting them in an environment where they're going to have to get along with people and learn things. So I think it's a very sad decision that all our sixth graders don't get to go. And Councilor Allen, you talked earlier about the capital asset. Well, I hope some of you remember how hard we had to work to move the Echoes project way down the line with those capital asset programs to the top so that it could be funded, collaborative effort from the community to fund that. This is a worthwhile program. We should all support it.
Mr. President?
Councilor Ryan.
I'll yield to...
Councilor Twiggs.
This is a non-discussion matter. Bert Freeman is the face, not only the face, he's the gut, and the whole program. This is an excellent program for our city, and let's just move forward.
Councilor Ryan.
Mr. President, I agree. I still remember being at Echoes. It was either March or April of 1974, if my math is right. And I think most of the kids in my class would still remember.
I think I remember you.
How'd he do?
One match fire.
But it was, what it does is it brings the kids into Forest Park, which is this great, wonderful resource. They get to spend the day in the woods of Forest Park. They get to see all of Forest Park, and it's just a great way to show these kids, because otherwise most of them wouldn't be there, and the more we can do to expose the kids to the beauty of the park, to the beauty of our city, all in favor. Thank you for the good work.
Councilor Shay.
I recall that when I was on the school committee, a while back, there was a movement one evening to end the Echoes program. You may recall that. Wow. And it turned out to be the largest meeting of parents and teachers and citizens of the city of Springfield. Wow. I don't have to talk long to tell you what a great program. We all know that. In fact, I'm sure Jesse went through the program himself. But I wish we had stronger language here. This says that we want to encourage the school committee. As Councilor Walsh pointed out, this council voted a $5 million bond to put this building in place. And the group of students that are missing out are probably one of the groups that could use it the most. And the other point is that, and this is just a small thing, but in talking to Pat Sullivan one time, he indicated that the vandalism in the parks has dropped off severely because all the students have gone through, they see the beauty of the park, they see the importance of the environment, and in this day and age, especially the winter program, they'll learn how to survive in a winter like we're all doing tonight when it's down in the 20s. They probably could give us a few tips. So, you know, my rambling here is that I wish this could be stronger language than encourage, but mandate that all students be required to go through the program.
Councilor Gomez.
Well, I just want to say that I did go through Echoes. Echoes is something that was near and dear to my heart because it helped me, I guess, move into the world of Boy Scouts and as a Cub Scout. And I stayed many years, and inevitably, with great irony, I got to become the boating director for 2 years at Camp Seco. So I was in charge of that whole lake when I really didn't understand what I was applying for. But, you know, winter survival, I think, is one of I guess the important thing of what this resolution is about. It's that part of the program has been taken out. And kids this day and age being on autopilot, that's what I talk about with my son, with the iPad and the phone. You know, we get to that point as, you know, young parents, we just give the phone to our kids and we really don't get them involved enough. There's going to be a day when they're going to be trapped outside, when it's going to be very, very cold, and this winter survival class helped a lot of people probably. You know, maybe they're going to be in the woods one day, you never know, and they're going to learn these skills and learn how to survive through that time so they can move forward. So I'm happy to support this. I would love to be put on as a co-sponsor, and if there's anything I can do when it comes to Echoes, I'm definitely there as an ally and as a contributor. Thank you.
Councilor Harriman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just echo the sentiments of my colleagues. I think there's several members of this body who would have gone through the Echoes program, though I would dare say I may have been the most recent. And so I would also ask to be added as a co-sponsor, and I would say, you know, I agree with Councilor Shea that the kids who might be missing out on this do need it the most, because not only are they building outside skills, but they're building team building skills, they're getting leadership skills, and those are the type of students we may see one day on this body. I'd also give a personal thank you to Bert Friedman, who was my Echoes teacher, and for all of his service in pushing that program forward, making the new building a reality, and I hope that we'll have a chance to hear from him tonight.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
You said it all. Just to let you know, the last paragraph, you know, I know that you wish it would be stronger, but I'm glad that we have the sense of the council. But I think it's something that can be worked out. And I think Echoes has to continue to be a district-wide program for the city of Springfield. So it shouldn't be the school that you go to, it should be all the schools, you know, the empowerment zone schools, the other schools, and it started out that way and it should continue that way. I hope that we can get a resolution for the students that aren't able to go. And thank you very much.
May I just ask, Mr. President, what are the next steps to making that happen?
Well, I think I sent everybody in the council a copy of the letter that we sent to the school committee. And if you wish, I'll send you another copy of that. And we're waiting to hear from the school committee and, you know, see if we can work something out between the school committee and the Empowerment Zone Board. I think it's important that every student goes through the winter survival program, and I'm really heartbroken that so many students are missing out. It's something that they really will keep in their memory for their whole life. And also, it's a good point to say that it gives the students an opportunity to do something hard. When they're out in the woods and it's cold and they have to work together, they work together and they get it done. And they can take that lesson, transfer it right to the classroom. It's not easy in the classroom, but those are the types of skills that they need. And, I think that going forward, with your help, we'll get it done. And by the way, what I just passed out are screenshots from the Friends of Echoes Facebook and also the Echoes Facebook site. We got thousands of people that looked at that site. The site was shared 150 times. So it really struck a nerve. It was definitely a public outcry saying we have to keep the Echoes program intact for all the students in the city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilor Ash. We have one more item on the agenda.
Take the last, switch that order.
We may have to go into executive session for that last item, and so.
Item number 30 is the diversity resolution.
Well, did we actually vote on the Echoes?
We did, yes.
We did, okay. Sorry, I missed that.
All right, this diversity resolution was, I am the lead sponsor on this, and so I'm going to ask Vice President Councilor Walsh to step in.
Councilor Ramos?
Thank you, Madam President. Before I begin, I just, seeing my name in front of you reminds me of the newspaper article from a few weeks ago on the Republican. I don't know if you guys.
Well, maybe it will bring you luck.
So what we have before us this evening is a resolution on diversity. And if you remember, we were in this chamber a few weeks ago as I gave my speech after I was re-elected president of this council. And one of the things that I mentioned was diversity. And I want to read it into the record. And as I'm reading it, I'm going to ask that we pass this around. I'd like each of my colleagues to have a copy of these statistics. Maybe a couple more over there. I'll take one. And it reads, whereas the city of Springfield strives to be a diverse and inclusive world-class urban community where people unite to form a caring, learning, participating, sustainable community, and whereas the city of Springfield has a racially, ethnically, and culturally diverse population, and more than 61% of our residents are Hispanic, Latino, African American, Asian American, or multiracial. And whereas the city of Springfield operates as a Plan A form of government, which is a strong mayor form of government, that in turn grants many powers to the mayor's department heads, and whereas only 5 of the 26 department heads currently employed by the city of Springfield are from a diverse background, and whereas there is room for improvement in the area of diversity among department heads in the city of Springfield in order to have a municipal workforce that truly reflects the community's diverse makeup, and whereas the economic and social benefit of having a diverse workforce in organizations from top to bottom has been proven time after time, and most institutions have formal protocols processes and policies in place to promote diversity within their workforce because of it. And whereas most large American institutions, private, public, and nonprofit, have those same protocols in place. Now therefore be it resolved that the Springfield City Council strongly urges the Springfield Executive Branch to work together with the City Council to identify ways to diversify Springfield's cabinet of department heads so that it better reflects the population of our city, and be it further resolved that the Springfield City Council offers its full support in helping take the necessary steps to increase diversity among city departments leadership, whether it's devising a comprehensive targeted recruitment plan, increasing professional development opportunities for existing employees, or other innovative ideas. And so the intention behind proposing this diversity resolution is to begin a dialogue and have a conversation about a very difficult subject. I know it's an uncomfortable subject for some people. Anytime that we talk about race or diversity, it's a difficult subject, but it's a necessary subject. Diversity is one of my top priorities. And as you look at the chart, it's difficult to argue that there isn't an issue with diversity in terms of our department heads in the city. If you look at the overall population of the city, you can see, according to the Gaston report that was released in August of last year, there's a 45% Hispanic population in the city of Springfield. 17%, it's actually closer to 18% African American, 31% white, 6.1% other. But when you look at the city department heads, there's a very big discrepancy between the two groups, right? It's actually 81% white, 11% African American, and 3.8% Latino, and 3.8% Asian American. And so it's hard to argue that there isn't an issue here, right? When you look at these, just wanted to give you all a visual that there's an issue here. And I just want to be clear about what this is, and more importantly, what it isn't. No one is calling for anyone to be fired, right? We're not asking for department heads to be fired or replaced. I think that our department heads are great. I think that they do a fabulous job. I work with them on a daily, weekly basis, and they do a fabulous job. They're very qualified, and they deserve to be in the positions that they're in. They earned it. They worked their way up. No one is calling anybody a racist. We're not pointing fingers and calling anyone racist or any names. We're just trying to have a very professional, cordial conversation about diversity and race. And we should be able to do that as legislators. And we're not calling on anyone to hire unqualified candidates. We're talking about qualified people who work in our departments, qualified minority candidates that have applied for positions and for whatever reason, not selected. And so our goal is to help those folks, help those qualified minority candidates who have the ambition to advance in their careers, and create those opportunities for advancement, to level the playing field so that everyone gets a fair chance of advancement. And I just want to point to a couple of different departments just to give you an example of how unbalanced this process is. When the position for example, when the position opened up for the new police commissioner, that position was only opened up to deputy chiefs. But when you look at the makeup of those who were occupying the position of deputy chief, it wasn't very diverse. And so off the bat, it was very unfair to qualified minority candidates. When you look at the position of the Springfield Fire Department, which was recently filled we were notified shortly thereafter that there were at least 2 qualified minority candidates who applied for the position, were interviewed, but were not selected for whatever reason. Now, what we heard during the special meeting that I called for that purpose was that these 2 qualified minority candidates were even more qualified than the person who was selected for the position. And if that was the case, then we have to figure out and identify what it is that's missing here, because if we have qualified minority candidates who are applying for positions but not being selected, then what is it that is missing? And the reason that was given by the mayor for that decision was that the person who was selected interviewed better than the people who were not selected. So let's focus on that reasoning for a second. If indeed that is the case, 2 things. Number 1, I would say be very careful with that, with that reason, because it could be viewed as discriminatory. If saying that one person interviews better than another and there's a language barrier, or the person who did not get selected does not speak English as their first language or speaks English as their second language, then I think it would be discriminatory to suggest that that person is less qualified based on their accent or inability to speak English better or equally as the other person. I don't believe that was the case. I would say the second option is that basically the person that was selected does interview better than the person who was not selected. And if that's the case, and I'm going to give the mayor the benefit of the doubt, I think that's, I'm going to believe the mayor in his reason, but that's a professional development issue. That means that we're failing our current employees by not offering them the opportunities to develop those sort of skills to interview for a higher position. And so that's what we want to get at. That's what we want to identify. And that's what this resolution calls for, is a conversation about where's the disconnect? What is it that we're missing that we have to provide, that we should provide our employees to prepare them for advancement and to give everyone an opportunity for advancement? And so again, I'm trying to be very cordial, very respectful, very professional in our approach. I want to thank those other 8 councilors who signed on to this resolution. This is a very important issue that has to be addressed. I know like I said, it's an uncomfortable subject, but it has to be discussed. The first step in addressing and fixing an issue is to acknowledge that it exists. And so this is our first step, to acknowledge we understand that there's an issue here. We're not saying it's intentional. We're not calling the mayor any names. We're not disparaging the mayor's hiring practices. We're simply saying, let's have a conversation about how we can improve this for the future and give everyone an even playing field. Again, just want to, the one thing that I don't want to happen is for this issue to be ignored. And so we will continue to push for this, to have a conversation about diversity. I think it's very important to the people of the city of Springfield, and we owe it to them to continue this conversation. So, thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak on the issue? Councilor Ash.
I want to thank Councilor Reynolds for bringing this forward. As I said, it sometimes can be uncomfortable for folks to talk about this subject, and I want to be upfront that I'm going to abstain from this vote, but I want to be clear as to why, and so people understand. I want to say out from the outfront that I'm 100% in support of the goals around diversity and fairness and all of those things and all that means in every walk of life. And I mean, that's primary. I want to make sure that that's clear to everyone. My concern around the resolution is that I understand that it's mentioned within the resolve that we are in a strong mayor form of government, and so that's very defined. And our role as city councilors is very defined as well. It's around land uses and approving the budgets and all those things. So I think we're overstepping our bounds when we get into that arena, and my sense is that in this room and within this body, there's probably 1, 2, 3, maybe more of my colleagues that will someday hope and maybe will take that office of the mayor, and then they will see as mayor that it's their responsibility and they're answerable to the public to make sure that those department heads or others are the best suited for that position and all those things, and it's their responsibility. And I think that this mayor has been very, very sensitive to that fact, and I think it's been displayed within our workforce, and we look at our school department and other areas, that he has made great strides and great efforts to make sure that happens. And again, my concern and my reluctance to sign on to this is solely because I think they need to be separated. Our job as city councilors is very defined, and his job as mayor is very defined as well, and it's his responsibility to do that. Again, I appreciate Council Ramos in bringing this forward, and I know how passionate he is about the subject, and I'm not opposed to him to doing all this, and it makes sense. But I just think from a structural level, I think it needs to be separated. That's why I'll abstain from the vote.
Anyone else wishing to speak on the subject? Councilor Ryan?
I want to commend Council President Ramos for bringing this forward. I think it's brought forward in a very positive and forward-looking manner, and certainly I don't take it as a negative statement towards anyone, but something that we all as city leaders have to continue to keep at the forefront. And I believe I had intended or had asked to be a co-sponsor, so Mr. Clerk, if you could correct the record, but this is something that's important that we, in the day-to-day work we do here, keep in the forefront. And again, I commend you for bringing this forward.
Councilor Gomez?
Thank you, Madam President. No, we're getting to the wee hours of the night. I want to get going. I want to say I think this is so important. This is definitely something that needs to be said, not only in the powers of the city council, but we are direct advocates. We are direct people that people look towards our constituents for us to voice their opinion. Primarily the Latino community, even on this council, there's only 2 Latinos, and in respect to the rest of everyone, your diversity and your ethnic background. Me and Orlando represent 72,000 Latino people. So when a lot of you guys get the call, if there's language barrier there, automatically you guys refer to us. So when you look back at the situation, sometimes, and it's not, the issue is whenever we talk about diversity, automatically somebody turns it around and says, well, I'm not racist. We're not saying anybody's racist. We're just looking at the makeup. And, I'm not here to call anybody out. We're just here to call out the situation and the issue specifically that's going on. We have a lot of folks that work for us in these different departments that are very, very unhappy. That if they do say something, there's some consequences and repercussions, and that means employment to some of them. And they're scared to say things. And a lot of us as counselors get a lot of those conversations. So sometimes I have to do what's just, and we have to stand here and represent that constituency that doesn't want to be put on the front line. Because at the end of the day, if it wasn't for us, then who else? If the calls don't get picked up, his office is very diverse. When you go in there, you have Mindy, you have Darren Ross, you have Carolyn, but realistically, the ones that are moving the chessboard, that are moving the big projects around, it's not a secret. I don't see a difference there. I'm not saying that we don't have good relationships with them or they treated me wrongly, which is not the case. The fact of the matter is it's in the federal level that there is this issue going on when it comes to divisive language. And it's happening at the state level, and it's even happening here in the city. And we cannot be afraid anymore because of politics or whatever the case may be, that we don't want to say something because we're afraid that we're going to have some backlash. believe it's very cowardly of us or any of us to say that, hey, listen, you're an advocate for the people. Just like when I presented the resolution a long time ago about Puerto Rico, about the fiscal crisis, and about Oscar Lopez, and I generally related it to what was happening in Ireland many moons ago, before Puerto Rico. Just like Ireland, just like Puerto Rico, what's happening now. And I'm saying that the mayor has stepped up to on another level as when it came to the crisis of what happened with Hurricane Maria. But realistically, what I'm saying is the Irish culture understands very well what exactly we're talking about, because before it was us, before it was the African American community, it happened to the Irish. And it happened before that happened to the Jews. And then after, in between the meantime, it happened to the Jews. We're trying to create just the conversation, because if we don't have a place where we can just have a conversation, it seems that all the time what we do is we just talk on the newspaper, and we don't get a chance to have a meeting or sit down to have a human being, a man, woman to woman, man to man, or community to community, because it's so hard just to get somebody in the room, because everybody's going to scream. They're doing this for political gain. In respect to, obviously, all of us have aspirations, but initially, I had this conversation with Councilor Fennec. We agree on 90% of the issues. Regardless, we're all on the same side. We want to see a better Springfield. Crime has fallen 45%. We, as a body, we have been doing some fantastic things. But when it comes to diversity, and when it comes to just bringing the conversation up without having an argument, this, even though it's the hardest thing to do, because of compassion and love, because we all are, I believe, a person of faith or some kind of divinity, we can come together as people and have this conversation to make sure that this is addressed and it's understood. Because when we stop doing that, then we start failing our constituents.
I will try to
Councilor Edwards.
Try to be very brief. I stand as somebody who has aspirations for the corner office. No intentions of ever running for anything other than to be the best city councilor in Ward 3. So I don't want to be the mayor, and I don't think it's fair to put this all on the mayor's shoulders, that this is somehow an indictment of him or an encroachment of his powers. But the reality is what the reality is. I'm 58 years old, and I can remember the time when there was never more than 1 or 2 people of color on the city council. And I hope that everybody here, perhaps except for Jesse, can remember at that time. I believe that the advent of ward representation had a lot to do with the fact that it was so difficult for people of color to be voted in and onto this council. The reality is, though, if we can step back with an unbiased eye and look at the makeup of the city and who runs the city, the reality is there is nobody of color that has multi-million-dollar contracts that they're giving out. And what I mean by that, who builds the roads? It's not a person of color who sits down with the developers who build the buildings, to build the roads. The head of the school department does an outstanding job. That's a lot of jobs that he has oversight of. So the jobs that we do have as department heads are generally the ones that are not the most significant financially or economically within the city. When we talk about the fire department and the advancement of officers and who's a candidate and who's not, regardless of what the criteria of interviewer was, the reality is that we have as our chief what we've always had as our chief, a person who is not of color. When it comes to the police department, when it's time to advance, all of the qualified candidates look the same. And this has happened, and this is a reflection of the history, and I'm really proud of the direction of the city. I love what I'm hearing about what's happening, where we're moving to, the tutelage of my mayor. I'm not here to criticize him. I think he's doing an excellent job, and yes, there is diversity within his office, but the reality is we can just, nobody wants to say there's any racists in the city of Springfield. Well, we know that there are racists in the city of Springfield. And it's not, nobody put me here to point out who they are, and I don't even think that would be appropriate. But anybody who says there's no racists in the city of Springfield and none that are employed by the city, they're lying to themselves. Or at least they're trying to lie to me, and I don't buy it. But it always doesn't have to necessarily even be framed as somebody being a racist. It can just be the natural, normal biases of people being comfortable in patronage and who we are comfortable being next to, working with us, and the relationships that develop as people that we went to school with. I mean, I can remember when Cathedral was going on and everybody was falling all over themselves talking about how great Cathedral was. Well, I got a brick. I went to Tech, okay? My schools, they tore the whole thing down. But I can remember when the kids at Cathedral didn't even want to come down to Tech to play our basketball team. So, I mean, things have changed. And so, I'm not trying to throw it on the bus, but I can remember when the fire station at Winchester Square, the doors were open. And the firemen that were in there were all white. And they were the ones who were pointing the hoses at people of color walking around there, because my mother and I got trapped in a car right there near Thompson Street, was a couple of blocks of the fire station. So that was all within my frame of remembrance of what was going on in this city. And I can remember Mo Jones having his tires all flattened mysteriously after some comments that he made. I can remember many situations, people being rioted. We just had a center yesterday, over the weekend, dedicated to one of the stalwarts of this community who talked about getting beat up. We have a civil rights activist sitting over here who was assaulted, arrested. I mean, the thing is, we have progressed a long way, but anybody who wants to put on the blinders or think that we still don't have work to do, and that's what this is about. This is just pulling back the veil of saying that there's still more work to be done, and we need to recognize that we need to do and put things in place, because whatever the excuse is that we're not qualified or we're not in these positions, it doesn't wash anymore. It's not acceptable anymore. If we don't have qualified people of color in the city, then why not? And what are we doing? Because they are graduating. They're going to good schools, and if they're not staying here in Springfield, then we're failing as leaders in our own community for not fostering an environment where they want to invest, because they're going to Virginia and getting jobs. They're going to Maryland and getting jobs. They're all going to Atlanta. There's so many people of color from Springfield and Atlanta, they got their own club. I mean, so ridiculous to say that we don't have and we're not educating people, and I know for a fact that we are. Because my cousin was the chief of staff for the mayor of Washington, D.C., and he's a classical graduate. So, I mean, we do bring up people of color that are qualified to be in these positions. And if we're not seeing it reflected in these types of studies, then maybe somebody should feel uncomfortable and be willing to ask why, and start to look at what do we need to put in place so that it is generally fair. And this is somebody who doesn't have any aspirations of being in any higher office, and all of you know what my wife looks like, who can trace her family history back through Quebec, to France, to 1600s, to a small village. Most of you know that my youngest son, the one that doesn't look like me, is married to the niece of our former colleague, Jose Tosado. So I have a multicultural family. My family goes back through Jamaica, back to Pakistan and China. I got my great-grandmother's full-blooded Blackfoot Indian from Hartford, Alabama. Okay, so I know what diversity looks like because I've got grandchildren that are half French and half Irish. So, I mean, I'd like to look at things because it's the right thing to do, and look at things not because of the color or if you're a-hole, it's not because of your color, and it's not because of your heritage, it's because of how you treat other people. And if it makes people uncomfortable to have these conversations, then so be it. Let's make people uncomfortable so that we're making sure that we're getting qualified people and we're not discriminating against anybody, but everybody's feeling like they've got a fair chance to compete.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councilor Twiggs and then Councilor Ramos.
I wish to have a short statement. I'm not going to talk very long. You know that it's always important that you as a legislator provide for the best for your city. An integrated city is a better city. A city that look out for all of its members equally is a better city. Now you can take it anywhere you want to. Now if we got 8 people sponsoring this thing, let's vote on this thing before I have to walk out. You know, I got diabetes, you know. They call it sugar where I come from. So I call for immediate vote on this issue, please.
The sponsor
He
wants
has a drawer full
to,
of
still want to make a few comments.
I just wanted to make sure that I do have some ideas on how we can follow up on this resolution. One of the things that I wanted to do was meet with the Human Resource Department and find out what exactly we're currently doing in terms of recruitment and advancement opportunities. And perhaps one of the things that we have to do is share that information a little bit better. And then we can also talk about how we can improve that system. So, this isn't the end of it. We have some follow-up action that we have to take. But again, I appreciate everyone's support on this resolution.
Just quickly, I promise you I'll be brief. Councilor Twiggs. I think it's very clear that the numbers, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to the city. It's embarrassing to the mayor. I think the mayor knows, just based off of what you filed, and then based off of the numbers. Sometimes you don't know until they're put in front of you. But based off of the numbers, I'm sure he's going to do better. He has to do better. And I'm sure he'll digest this information and he'll go back to the drawing table and he'll be mindful, thanks to you, Counselor, when he hires his next department head, that people are watching. Citizens of Springfield are watching. And I have to imagine that before the citizens have to select another mayor, that prior to that occurring, this mayor will do the right thing, and he will hire a more diverse staff. And I actually looked at these numbers 4 years ago, and what is most disappointing is that these numbers haven't changed. And what was even more disturbing is that these numbers for positions that are appointed, for positions that the mayor has direct authority over hiring, are worse than both the fire department and the police department. And they actually have to go through a civil service test and pass a test before they're elected. So there's no way that the mayor should be worse in terms of diversifying his staff when he can do it unilaterally than these other two departments. So thank you for your courage.
On the issue, I'm sorry, I didn't notice you here. Councilor Letterman.
Thank you, Madam President. I will also be brief, but I want to thank Councilor Ramos for bringing this forward. It's not an easy issue to discuss, and that's become clear in the last several days. I just want to make one point, which is this is not a city council versus mayor issue. This is a conversation about how we are looking forward as the government of the city of Springfield, ultimately accountable to the residents of the city of Springfield. And while the city council does have very specific authority in certain areas, we are also the legislative body of the city. We are the closest elected body to the people. And we have a responsibility to convey and act as a check and balance. I'd also point out that the mayor hasn't been, the current mayor has not been directly responsible for the hires of every department head. He inherited department heads, he appointed others. This is a conversation about a broader strategy moving forward. And I think it's one that we want to work in cooperation with the executive branch, and similarly to the way that we've worked in cooperation on this body. So I thank Councilor Ramos for bringing this forward. I'm proud to be a co-sponsor of it and look forward to supporting it.
On the resolution, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? I vote no. Abstentions? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
On approving the resolution, Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Shea.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Gomez.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Councilor Ramos.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Edwards.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ash. Abstain. Councilor Hurst.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Walsh.
No. More than sufficient. This item passes.
The last item on tonight's agenda is a transfer of $917,597.55 from free cash to the law department.
All right, so just, this is the final item on the agenda, on tonight's agenda. We may or may not have to go into executive session, depending on how the conversation goes. We'll start with the presentation by Attorney Pikula.
Good evening. Ed Pikula, City Solicitor. So this transfer seeks two different buckets. One involves a judgment, and the other involves about 18 cases that we're trying to settle in various stages. Some of them, we actually have settlement agreements. Others, we have a range that we've narrowed it down to. The judgment is the case involving Will Quaterman. I'd ask that you I can just make a few points if I could beg your indulgence for a minute. The original judgment dates back to October of 2014 in Superior Court. It was the second of two cases dating back to 2006 involving transfer of a liquor license from State Street to the Asylum Building. The second involves the request for a new license from the License Commission for the same location. First case was tried in federal court, and there was a judgment in favor of the city. The second case was tried in Superior Court. The verdict from the jury, they awarded two different amounts, $250,000 and then another $100,000. In addition, there was attorney's fees awarded, costs, and interest dating back at 12% to 2008. The total amount owed back in October 2014 was $675,413. We had some post-trial motions resulting in the judgment being reduced by taking away the $250,000 portion of the judgment. It was awarded by the jury. We tried to resolve the case in mediation in 2015. That was unsuccessful. We then had cross appeals. You know, the plaintiff wasn't happy that money was taken away. We weren't happy the whole thing wasn't taken away. The appeals court decided to leave the case the way it was. The city requested the SJC take up the matter. They denied. That was last June. So at that time, the judgment with all the costs, attorney's fees, interest, etc., was $473,186.44. The city then asked the United States Supreme Court to take up the case. We received a decision back on that in December, and they denied our petition for cert. So as we sit here today, looking at all the costs and going through all the interests, etc., through February 10th, which is this Saturday, I'm trying to get a check out by Friday, it's $506,000 even. So that's the judgment that needs to be paid. We can't ignore that. We can't delay it. We've appealed as far as we can. There's nothing else to do but pay it. And we have the free cash to do it. This person, as I said, he's been waiting a long time on this, Mr. Quaterman. So I'd like to get that approved. I have a list of about 18 other cases, all of which I can go through with you, but you don't have to. Some of them, one's a construction case dating back to 1990, that we have a settlement agreement. There's a few personal injury cases, people who got injured, kids who got injured in the school department, personal injuries. And the rest of them are motor vehicle accident cases. And they take up the balance of the $917,000. So I'm asking you to approve the transfer. If you do have questions on any of these, because it would get into my attorney work product, the mental impressions about the case and opinions, the strategies and whatnot, I'd ask that we do it in executive session. But yeah, this is something where I beg your indulgence to, one, approve this this money so I can pay this judgment, and approve the other so I can get rid of about 18 other cases that have been hanging around, some of them since 1980.
Councilor Fenton.
Thank you, Mr. President. Certainly, we gotta pay the judgment. That's about $500,000. The balance is close, somewhere in the range of $400,000. So I know it's late, but I do feel compelled to at least hear some information about the other cases. We don't have to go through each of the 18 of them, but I personally would like to know a little bit more about that other $400,000-ish number. So I would make a motion that we go into executive session with the intent to discuss litigation strategy, and that we not return. And that obviously we allow attorneys present and Mr. Plant to remain for that session.
Motion made by Councilor Fenton, seconded by Councilor Gomez. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Going into executive session. Councilor Williams, absent. Councilor Twiggs, absent. Councilor Shea, absent. Councilor Gomez. Yes. Councilor Walsh. Yes. Councilor Fenton.
Yes.
Yes. Councilor Letterman. Yes. Councilor Edwards. Yes. Councilor Ash. No. Councilor Hurst. Yes. Councilor Ryan. Yes. Councilor Allen. Yes. Councilor Ramos.
Yes, more than sufficient. We will now go into executive session. We'll take a brief recess to allow